Quiner, Wyoming's liaison from the National Conference of State Legislatures, is here today to visit with members about NCSL services. Mark is also a former staff member of our own LSO. The Wyoming legislature belongs to NCSL, and the organization has a wealth of resources to help you with your legislative work. Mr. Quiner will be on the back bench of the Senate this afternoon to answer any questions about NCL services or requests for information. Please stop by and say hi. He's right there. Let's all give Mark a big warm round of applause. All right. Yes, sir, Senator Case.
Mr. President, Mr. Quiner wrote the first bill I ever had in the legislature.
Nice.
It is for the Lander landslide.
Did he pound it into a stone with a tablet in a stone there with a chisel? Okay. Yeah, Senator Guru.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have many introductions today, but this is going to be one of my favorites. Mr. President, hospitality and tourism, our number 2 industry, has generated in the last year over $250 million in state and local taxes. 30,000 jobs in this state, members of the 68, are come from this industry. It's our second leading industry. It's an industry that's on the come. It's an industry that's on the move. And we are flexing our muscles as a member of that industry. I've been proud to be a part of a lot of the forward progress that this industry is making in the workplace, in workplace safety, in helping create good, high-paying jobs. Always a rap on our industry has always been, man, the jobs don't pay so well. Well, let me tell you, that's just flat wrong. And these are the people that are making it happen, and I'd like you to welcome the tourism and hospitality friends of Wyoming, all the way around. Folks, stand up and let's say hello. Hey.
Welcome to the Senate. Biggest crowd yet. Good job. I'm impressed. Mr. Vice President, you want to come and take the chair here? Yeah.
President Beitman.
Thank you, Mr. President. While I was up in the chair, I missed the deadline on one of my bills. Ooh. Ouch. So I'm gonna ask you guys if you would oblige me, pursuant to Senate Rule 4-5A, I move for approval by the Senate to consider bill draft number 25 LSO 0448 for numbering. The catch title is Small Business Emergency Bridge Loan Program. The draft missed the noon deadline today for approval. If you would beg my leave here, I'll give you a quick explanation.
Please go ahead,
of what
Mr.
the
President.
bill does. So the bill sets up a emergency bridge loan program for small businesses during a declared state of emergency by the governor. I thought of this bill idea when I was out fighting the fire on the Elk Fire up in Dayton, thinking about how these ranchers are going to be able to get back on their feet quickly, small businesses, etc. So what the bill does, briefly, it sets up a cooperation with banks, local banks that want to participate. They don't have to if they don't want to, but if a local bank wants to participate in the program, it'll be administered by the Department of Ag. The banks, kind of similar to what happened during COVID to get relief out quickly, banks will vet these people. Typically your ranchers, your small business owners have relationships with their local banks. That's who you'd want to go to for something like this in the event of a natural disaster. They could go to their local bank, the local bank could vet them, make sure that they're creditworthy. The person seeking the loan would have to put up collateral, and I would envision the collateral being potential insurance proceeds from an insurance policy or other disaster like FEMA money or something like that. This is a 0% bridge loan, short-term, up to 3 years. It's a revolving loan account. That's the gist of the idea. I would hope for your favorable consideration so we can get this numbered and introduced and let this thing go through the process so we can hear more about it. And you all can work on it and make it your own as well with your ideas. So with that, Mr. President or Vice President, I'll stand for any questions.
There will be discussion. Let me address this, though. The rule requires a 2/3 vote of the elected members of the Senate. Senator Guru.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President, and I'm an enthusiastic supporter of this idea. But I was just wondering, I had a question for the President. Would it be good or be a fair idea to say that maybe we could all discuss this tonight at the Travel and Tourism Cocktail Party at the Little America from 6 to 8 tonight? Would that be a good spot time to do that?
Other discussion? Any other discussion? Senator Hicks.
Mr. Vice President, I'm just wondering if that's where the discussion takes place. Do we get a zero interest rate on any of those adult beverages associated with this discussion?
Any other discussion? Okay. The chief clerk will call the roll.
Roll call on consideration of 25 LSO 0448. Anderson? Aye. Barlow? Aye. Boner? Aye. Brennan? Aye. Case? Aye. Cooper? Aye. Crago? Aye. Crum? Aye. Dockstetter? Aye. Driscoll? Aye. French? Aye. Guru? Aye. Hicks? Aye. Hutchings? Aye. Ide? Aye. Jones? Aye. Kolb? Aye. Landon? Aye. Larson? Aye. McEwen? Aye. Nethercott? Aye. Olson? Aye. Pappas? Aye. Pearson? Aye. Rothfuss? Aye. Salazar? Aye. Schuler? Aye. Scott? Aye. Smith? Aye. Steinmetz? Aye. President Beitman? Aye. Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. On the motion, 31 aye.
Having 2/3 of the vote of the Senate, the motion is approved. President Beitman.
Messages from the House.
From the House of Representatives. Mr. President, the following messages are dated 27 January 2025. The following bills passed the House on third reading by the votes indicated. Message number 125, House Bill 20, K through 12 school facility leasing. Ayes 38, noes 23, excused 1. Message number 127, House Bill 28, commercial driver's licenses revisions. Ayes 60, noes 1, excused 1. Message number 129, House Bill 38, ad valorem taxation, payment and credit of penalties. Ayes 60, noes 1, excused 1. Message number 130, House Bill number 40, sales and use tax revisions. Ayes 61, excused 1. Message number 132, House Bill 69, foreign adversary ownership or control of business entities. Ayes 61, excused 1. Message number 133, House Bill 75, coal severance tax rate. Ayes 57, noes 4, excused 1. Message number 134, House Bill 93, Protect Wyoming's Lands Act. Ayes 57, noes 4, excused 1. Message number 137, House Bill number 129, School Finance, Dates for Fund Transfers. Ayes 61, excused 1. Message number 140, House Bill number 33, Vehicle Sales and Use Tax Distribution Highway Fund. Ayes 48, noes 13, excused 1. Message number 139, House Bill number 22, Water and Wastewater Operator Emergency Response. Ayes 61, excused 1. Mr. President, the following bills passed the House in an amended form. Message number 126, House Bill number 25, Vehicle Accident Reporting Amendments. Ayes 53, noes 8, excused 1. Message number 128, House Bill number 30, Driver's Licenses and IDs Revisions. Ayes 61, excused 1. Message number 131, House Bill 41, Environmental Quality Irrevocable Letters of Credit. Ayes 61, excused 1. Message number 135, House Bill 121, Hospital Pricing Transparency. Ayes 58, noes 3, excused 1. Message number 136, House Bill number 122, Senior Citizen Service Districts Authorization and Renewal. Ayes 44, noes 17, excused 1. Message number 138, House Joint Resolution 2, Foreign Adversaries Prohibited Property Ownership. Ayes 58, noes 3, excused 1. Sincerely, Katie Talbot, House Chief Clerk.
Senator Pappas.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just wanted to talk about an issue we just voted on a bill that needed to be numbered. I don't know if you all realized that there was a snafu right when we were trying to renumber him. We tried to release our bills, and I had two that I wanted to release. And so I went back into the bullpen and asked them both to be released. I needed to get a signature on one of them, so I went and got a paper copy and wrote it. So I see that that's been released. Now we're back up online, but the other one is pending. So I'm wondering whether that has not been approved. I would ask the clerk to find out, because I did request it prior to the 12 o'clock. But it says pending, and I just want to make sure that that verbal communication got there. I don't know if anybody else was in that same boat, but the computer system went down and there was a little glitch there, so.
Okay,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Chief
Mr.
Clerk is
President.
going to go take a look at that. Senator Case?
Well, Mr. Chairman, that deadline has passed, but I think several of us are in the same boat and gave a verbal authorization. I'm sure they got it done. I'm sure if you wait just a little bit, they'll clear the queue and get it up. Otherwise, if they didn't, then we've got to do a similar motion, but let's just wait it out a little bit. I think they'll all come up.
Yeah, thank you. Okay. Madam Majority Floor Leader.
Your Majority Floor Leader requests that the Senate complete third reading before 3
Okay,
o'clock today. Good senators? Keep the trains on the track.
all right, duly noted. Before we get to third reading, we need to do reports from standing committees, and then we'll jump into third reading.
The following reports are dated January 27, 2025. Mr. President, Committee Number 4, Education, to whom is referred Senate File 86, Alternative Teaching Certificate, respectfully reports same back to the Senate with the recommendation that it do pass amended. Ayes, Senators Brennan, Olson, Rothfuss, Schuler, and Scott. Senator Schuler, Chairman. Mr. President, Committee Number 4, Education, to whom is referred Senate File 109, Open Enrollment within Wyoming School Districts, respectfully reports same back to the Senate with the recommendation that it do pass amended. Ayes, Senators Brennan, Olson, Rothfuss, Schuler, and Scott. Senator Schuler, Chairman. Mr. President, your Committee Number 9, Minerals, Business, and Economic Development, to whom was referred Senate File 97, Trust Code Revisions, respectfully reports same back to the Senate with the recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Senators Anderson, Jones, and Rothfuss. Excused, Senators Cooper and Nethercott. Senator Anderson, Chairman.
Thank you. Bills on third reading. Thank you. Senate File 2, third reading of the Senate file.
Senate File 2, Hunting Licenses, Weighted Bonus Points System, sponsored by the Travel Committee, an act relating to game and fish.
There's an amendment. Will the reading clerk please read in the amendment?
Senate File 2, third reading amendment number 1, corrected copy, delete.
Senator Case, this looks like your amendment.
Yes, Mr. President, I would move third reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 2 and ask for your favorable consideration. I proposed this amendment the other day. It was a little bit different, and it is very close to what you see, but if you look at the names on the amendment, you'll see that I'm not alone on this one. With a few small changes, we kind of agreed on an amendment to be proposed to you. What this does is actually create a transitional process where the folks that are under the old system or the current system stay under it for a while. We set the date for that, I think it was 2032, and they go under one system while the other system gets up and off and running. And when I proposed the amendment previously, it had some language that was kind of confusing. And this was suggested by one of our many fine people that have been participating in this system for a long time and had hoped before they got too far along that they'd be able to take advantage of it. But yet they realize, and this is the cool part about people in Wyoming, that the system does have to evolve and change. And so I ask for your support of the amendment. I think my co-sponsor would like to address it as well. And, you know, I really appreciate the help on this and thinking behind it. None of it, which was mine, a constituent, and the good senator from the fine, windy, but very cold place way down south and over. I can't do it, but you'll know who I'm talking about.
I think I see him over here on the corner of my hairy eyeball, Senator Hicks.
Mr. President, on and for the amendment, and having somebody that has sit through the task force and worked on this issue, if you think sales tax distributions are complicated, you should look at preference points and weighted preference point. What the effect of the amendment really does is honors all those people that are vested in this program, some of them for 28, 30 years. It gives them 7 years to phase out. During that 7-year period, almost every one of those individuals will have the opportunity, if they so choose, to draw a permit. Now, they may want to hold out for the very best of the best. That's a conscious decision. It maintains the current ratio, so it's the status quo, basically, for those recipients that are the ones that are most heavily vested in the program. For the others, it takes and moves that into the transition that when we talked about the no man's land, those people that really are almost nowhere, it transitions right into the weighted bonus point type of drawing. And then after 7 years, everybody's vested in that program. And this is very similar to what some of the other states have had to do over the years because of the issues that we've grappled in. After looking at this, I'm absolutely convinced this is probably the easiest way to transition from bonus points to weighted bonus points. We'll have the least confusion amongst all of the sportsmen out there because we honor that historic practice with to another 7 years. And in the meantime, it switches the program, and then after 7 years, everybody is in the exact same weighted bonus point. So it adds tremendous simplicity to trying to understand the complication of all these different point systems out there. And so, Mr. President, on and for the amendment.
Any discussion? Senator Landon.
Mr. President, thank you. Just real quickly, I wanted to thank the bringers of this amendment. Not only does it give hunters back home those extra 2 days, or 2 years rather, but it also embellishes that and creates a system that I think is very fair. It allows me to vote for the bill. Really appreciate the work of the two senators. So thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Anybody else for the first time? The bill sponsors want to go for a second time? Question being called. All those in favor of Senator Case's motion to adopt third reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 2, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Amendment has been adopted. Back on the bill. Discussion on the bill. Chief Clerk will call the roll.
Third reading roll call, Senate File 2. Anderson. Aye. Barlow. Aye. Boner. Aye. Brennan. Aye. Case. Aye. Cooper. Aye. Crago. Aye. Crum. Aye. Dockstetter. Aye. Driscoll. Aye. French. Aye. Guru. Aye. Hicks. Aye. Hutchings. Aye. Ide. Aye. Jones. Aye. Kolb. Aye. Landon. Aye. Larson. Aye. McEwen. Aye. Nethercott. Aye. Olson. Aye. Pappas. Aye. Pearson. Aye. Rothfuss. Aye. Salazar. Aye. Schuler. Aye. Scott. No. Smith. Smith, no. Steinmetz. Aye. President Beitman. Aye. Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. Senate File 2, 29 aye, 2 no.
Senate File 2, having received the affirmative vote of the majority of the members elected to the Senate, Senate File 2 has passed the Senate. Senate File 3, third reading of the Senate file.
Senate File 3, Mule and Whitetail Deer Separate Hunting Season, sponsored by the Travel Committee, an act relating to game and fish.
Discussion on Senate File 3. Discussion on Senate File 3. There are no amendments. You ready for the question? Question being called. Chief Clerk will call the roll.
Senate File 3, third reading roll call. Anderson? No. Barlow? No. Boner? Aye. Brennan? Aye. Case? No. Cooper? No. Crago? Aye. Crum? Aye. Dockstetter? No. Driscoll? Aye. French? Aye. Guru? Aye. Hicks? Aye. Hutchings? No. Ide? No. Jones? No. Cole? No. Landon? No. Larson? Aye. McEwen? No. Nethercott? No. Olson? No. Pappas? No. Pearson? No. Rothfuss? No. Salazar? No. Schuler? Aye. Scott? Aye. Smith? No. Steinmetz? Aye. President Beitman?
No.
No. Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. Senate File 3, 12 aye, 19 no.
Senate File 3, having failed to receive the affirmative vote of the majority of the members elected to the Senate, Senate File 3 has failed to pass the Senate. Senate File 42, third reading of the Senate file.
Senate File 42, Resort Hotel Liquor Licenses, sponsored by Senator Guru, an act relating to alcoholic beverages.
Senator Guru.
Thank you, Mr. President. We've been working with some of the interest groups, some of the legislators, and a lot of folks around working on this to come up with what I think is a pretty good breakthrough on trying to get more unanimous support, but I need a little more time, so I'd like to respectfully ask that we lay back Senate File 42 for one day.
Absent objection, Senate File 42 has been laid back for one day. Senate File 60, third reading of the Senate file.
Senate File 60, Sales Tax Distribution Rates, sponsored by Senator French, an act relating to sales and use tax.
There is an amendment, or Senator Crago.
Thank you, Mr. President. Without objection, I'd ask that Senate File 60 be laid back one day.
Absent objection, Senate File 60 has been laid back for one day. Senate File 81, third reading of the Senate file.
Senate File 81, Tax Exemption Property Owned by the State, sponsored by the Agriculture Committee, an act relating to taxation and revenue.
Any discussion on Senate File 81? Senator Case.
Mr. Chairman, when we were discussing this bill or Mr. President, when we were discussing this bill in committee of the whole, I suggested we should keep it alive because we might make it better. That was a big mistake, Mr. President. This is, there's actually several bills going around. There is now a bill that actually was worked on from the former Revenue Committee that looks at all the government exemptions and lets us decide which ones we want. And remember, this is constitutional. It says, the Constitution says that if it's property owned by a government agency that's used for a government purpose, it's the government purpose. That was passed in 1956. That's something really important that we have to think about, that has broad implications for all levels of government. We need to approach this in a more systematic and good way. I ask you to vote no.
Senator Nethercott.
Thank you, Mr. President. On and against this bill, for the reasons that my good senator from Fremont County has indicated, I think if we were to pass this, it really creates unfair competition in the private market. Why does it do that? Because it allows for those commercial enterprises, truly commercial enterprises, who are simply leasing land from the state to be exempt from property taxes, not contributing to their local economy in that way, and requiring others, their neighbor, maybe just across the street, who is their competitor, to pay property taxes. The only distinguishing feature is they were lucky enough to get the lease with the state. And so I do believe recognizing the differences for its purposes is the wiser way to go and is the wiser policy. Yeah, if it's a state property being used for government purposes, or those purposes outlined in the Constitution that are non-taxable, I think that that's prudent. But I do think that it creates an unfair competition in the market for commercial and business enterprises.
Senator McEwen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There's another, as Senator from Fremont County pointed out, another bill coming down. This kind of was a knee-jerk reaction, and it's really aimed at protecting just grazing lands, and it doesn't address the overarching problem of all the other uses of state lands and what's taxable and what's not. And the problem comes down to, we haven't defined what government use is. We wrote a law, says, if this is government use, you're tax exempt. But there's no test for what government use is. So there's a couple other bills coming that will take care of agricultural lands also. I think I stood up on this earlier. So I would suggest a no vote on this and see what's coming down the pike, and it'll help keep everything from getting muddy. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Senator Ride?
Thank you, Mr. President. I'll just sort of echo what the good chairman of Revenue said. We just got out of that discussion. Even the lobby for the ag community effectively agreed that the other bill coming up takes care of things a lot better. So thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Ride. Senator Craigo?
Thank you, Mr. President. On and for the bill. If someone can guarantee me that the next bill is going to pass, then I'm happy to vote no, but I don't think they can do that. So I'll be on and for this bill today. I'll be voting aye, because I do want to make sure we clean up this particular issue. And we've all heard testimony. This is one of the biggest issues that our county assessors are going to have to deal with, and also our producers out across the state. So please vote aye.
Okay. Oh, Majority Floor Leader.
Mr. President, just a point of order. Our rules do generally prohibit discussion of other bills. However, with the slate of property tax solutions, I don't know how we thoughtfully do that. And so I also think we need to take responsibility for understanding our persuasiveness of votes later on and understanding the global picture, other than passing them all out and hoping for the best. And the governor fixes it for us. I'm not sure that's the solution here either. So again, it is, our rules prohibit kind of comparing pieces of legislation here on the floor, and you're just dealing with the piece of legislation at the time. However, that disregards the reality of the circumstances of which we find ourselves, where multiple committees are doing the same work, dealing with the same topics, and creating many options for the body to consider that do conflict. So I do think a little bit of discretion is required under this circumstance, but I think it's ill-advised to pass them all out.
Senator Steinmetz.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you to the Majority Floor Leader for giving us some latitude. With that in mind, I would urge your aye vote on this bill, because as we know from other journeys down here and passing competing bills and things like that, Mr. President, we can, if those bills move forward, put an amendment on that said this bill controls should it pass. And I would advise us to consider something like that, because this is just too important of an issue to leave lying and wait for some other bill to come and address it. It may or may not. We don't know what might come up in the debates that we're having. We have debated this bill thoroughly. If that bill comes to us, then we can put a caveat in there. But this is just too important to my constituents out across the state to let it go as a no vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Case.
Mr. Chairman, I ask, Mr. President, I ask that we think about whether this bill is constitutional or not. Why is ag leasing grazing a government purpose? It's not. The Constitution adopted by our citizens in 1956 says that property owned by the government that is used for a government purpose, is grazing a government purpose, or does it benefit private individuals? That's the question you have.
Senator Pearson.
Thank you, Mr. President. I, as well, will be an aye vote on this bill. As far as constitutionality, what about our food supply? Is that not a government concern? We start doing this in our state, and you're going to have more ranchers throwing their hands in the air and not wanting to contribute to the food supply anymore. We're already hit federally by several rules and regulations. We have got to try to preserve our food supply. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Senator Hicks.
Mr. President, there seems to be some confusion here as to what the purpose of these lands are. So what's a governmental purpose? The governmental purpose is clearly not grazing, but it's not the action that we contemplate as to what's a governmental purpose here. It's what's the end result. And so you pay for the ability to graze those livestock. And so I would just take you to Article 7, Section 2. And under there, where it talks about state-owned lands, particularly for the school sections, which are the predominantly ones for which we issue grazing privileges, for which we recoup that. And so right in there in Article 2, or Article 7, Section 2, it talks about the leasing, the sale or leasing section number. So it contemplates in the Constitution that we're going to lease these properties out there. It's the revenue that meets the constitutional test. Those school trust lands have a fiduciary responsibility under Article 7, Section 2 to generate revenue. And if that revenue is from leasing to a company that wants to put a telecommunications tower up there, those lease revenues go back to the beneficiaries. Doesn't matter what type of lease activity under our constitutional construct. It's the money that we're talking about. And if you go down further into Section 2 on there, it says, provided that the rents for the ordinary use of such land shall be supplied. So we've talking about it's an eligible practice to lease those because they generate revenue for the school trusts. That's what it says here in the Constitution. It's not the activity, it's the money. It generates revenue. That's the purpose of those lands, was to generate revenue for the trustees, every 16th and 36th section, which is the primarily ones that we're talking about for grazing leases. Those revenues is what the Constitution foresaw, that is a governmental purpose to lease these and take those rents and those incomes and apply that money to the beneficiaries of those trust lands. So I would argue it is absolutely constitutional. That's why we've been doing these for decades and since the time of the Act of Admission when we acquired all those lands, is to generate revenue. It doesn't matter whether it's grazing or any other activity. It meets the constitutional muster. On and for the bill.
Senator Dockstader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Appreciate all this constitutional talk and double checking. I think we got away from the original question. Is this unfair competition?
Okay. Anybody else for their first time, second time? Senator Scott.
Mr. Speaker, and Mr. President, it seems to me that we've got to look at this kind of carefully. I think we do have a constitutional obligation that the revenues generated by the various lands that are leased for grazing or other purposes that were given to us for the benefit of the schools or our very institutions, those revenues ought to go to those schools or those institutions, the University of Wyoming and the several others that benefit from having lands that were granted to them. And I think if we start using them to generate tax revenue, if you want to put a provision in lieu of taxes on and say that will all go to the beneficiaries of the proper beneficiaries, primarily the public schools, that would be fine. But I think if you start using it to generate general tax revenue, then you run a real risk of violating. And I don't think this bill adequately deals with that set of issues. Mr. President, I think the real argument against this bill is it is flawed because it is incomplete and just simply does not define the governmental purposes, does not deal with those constitutional issues. And for that reason, it's probably a wise thing to defeat this bill and hope that a different solution will come along.
Anybody else? Senator Crago for your second time.
Thank you, Mr. President. So a couple things. One, I don't dispute what the good senator just had to say. There are questions left to be answered. That's why this bill only is in effect for 2 years. It gives us the time to go answer some of those questions. And we all keep talking about these state lands as they only apply to our farmers and ranchers around the state. There are other commercial operations that use those state lands every bit as much as our farmers and ranchers. Right now, the proposed rule that our good electeds down a few floors decided to propose only applies to will only eventually apply to the ag producers. Are we gonna also spread that out amongst all the other commercial users of those state lands? I would suggest we do that. Do we do it by income? How do we do that? How do we apportion that tax? The whole point of this bill is to get us enough time to figure that out. Because right now, whatever we do, if we don't pass something, it's going to be unfair to everyone. So I ask for an aye vote on this. Give us the time, give us 2 years to figure it out. That's all we're trying to do. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay. Question being called. Senate File 81 having been read 3 separate times. The question is, shall the bill pass the Senate? Chief Clerk will call the roll.
Third reading roll call, Senate File 81. Anderson? No. Barlow? Aye. Boner? Aye. Brennan? Aye. Case? No. Cooper? Aye. Crago? Aye. Crum? Aye. Dockstetter? No. Driscoll? Aye. French? Aye. Guru? Aye. Hicks? Aye. Hutchings? Aye. Ide? Aye. Jones? Aye. Cole? No. Landon? No. Larson? Aye. McEwen? No. Nethercott? No. Olson? No. Pappas? No. Pearson? Aye. Rothfuss? No. Salazar? Aye. Schuler? No. Scott? No. Smith? Aye. Steinmetz? Aye. President Beitman?
No.
No. Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. Senate File 81, 18 aye, 13 no.
Senate File 81 having received the affirmative vote of the majority of members elected to the Senate, Senate File 81 has passed the Senate. Introduction of Senate Files. Senate File 163, first reading of the Senate. Or, not first reading.
Senate File 163, partial tobacco products tax repeal, sponsored by Senator Pappas.
Senate File 163 is assigned to Committee Number 3, Revenue. Senate File 171.
Senate File 171, city and county regulatory reduction, sponsored by Senator Nethercott.
Senate File 171 is assigned to Committee Number 7, Corporations. Senate File 159.
Senate File 159, dental insurance, sponsored by Senator Jones.
Senate File 159 is assigned to Committee Number 10, Labor. All right, Madam Majority Floor Leader. Oh, wait, 1 second. Hold that thought. Senator Guru.
Thank you, Mr. President. Can I have the privilege of the floor?
Yes, sir. Floor is
One,
yours.
I think this will be my last one. I got lots of friends in town today. But two that are very special, just because it's their first time here, and they work for a public relations firm, not a lobbying firm, public relations and communications. But they're here for their first time, and they're just here taking in our work, and they're above me, and I wanted to introduce them. Brianne Bates and Lupita, I'm gonna get this right, Mangia Leon, sitting up above, and they're here from Jackson, and I just wanted to give them a warm Senate hello.
Welcome to the Senate, Vice President Salazar.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members of the, honorable members of the Senate, a friend of mine is here who also happens to be the chairman of what is called the Grand Old Party for the state of Wyoming, Mr. Frank E. Thorne. Could you give him a welcome, please?
Welcome to the Senate, Senator Pearson.
Thank you, Mr. President. Privilege of the floor, please.
Granted.
Today is my youngest son's birthday, and I'm not with him today. His name is Corbin, and I would love for us to sing happy birthday to him. Can we? Come on.
All right, let's fire up the Senate chorus here.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Corbin. Happy birthday to you.
The Senate chorus is starting to sound better. We might have to take this show on the road. Okay, Madam Majority Floor Leader.
All right, senators, we've got some good work to do today. We're going to drill down at 3 o'clock, and we're going to, the Senate's going to resolve itself into committee of the whole. We're going to drill down and get some work done today, senators.
All right.
It is a motion,
All right.
although you're not accepting them today.
Can you restate the motion?
Mr. President, I move that the Senate resolve itself into committee of the whole.
I love it. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. Senator Dockstader, come on up.
Come to order. First bill up for consideration. Senate File 17, please read it in.
Senate File 17, Carbon Dioxide Enhanced Oil Recovery Stimulus, an act relating to the administration of the government, sponsored by the Minerals Committee. It was referred to Committee Number 9, which returned to committee recommendation that it do pass amended. Ayes, Senators Anderson, Cooper, Jones, Nethercott, and Rothfuss. Senator Anderson, Chairman. Was re-referred to Committee Number 2, which returned to committee recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Senators Driscoll, Guru, Larson, Salazar, and Smith. Senator Salazar, Chairman.
Senator Anderson, what is your pleasure? And please give us some direction on the amendment as you do so.
Mr. Chairman, I move that when the committee of the whole rises to report, it do so with the recommendation that Senate File 17 do pass. And to orient you to this little bill is Senator Rothfuss, please.
Senator Rothfuss, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I'd ask that the Standing Committee Amendment Number 1 be read in at this time.
Please read it in.
Senate File 17, Standing Committee Amendment Number 1, page 5, line 3, after.
Senator Rothfuss.
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to move Standing Committee Amendment Number 1 to Senate File 17, and I will make sure I point out where it goes in as I walk through the bill. Mr. Chairman, this is the work over the interim, and actually we worked on it in the previous interim, and this legislation is intended to mitigate a market bias that was put in place by the feds when the 45Q legislation was put forward. So 45Q provides a tax credit per ton of CO2 that is injected or captured or recovered in various capacities, and there are different levels of tax credit that's available depending on what you do with that CO2. If you do atmospheric generation, there's one level, it's about $150, but the two levels that are important for us is there is $85 for a ton of CO2 that is captured and sequestered in permanent geological sequestration. And there is $60 of 45Q credit available if it is used for enhanced oil recovery sequestration. That market bias is important because we, in the state of Wyoming, Mr. Chairman, as you know, use that CO2. We want that CO2 available for use in enhanced oil recovery, and that leads to tremendous yield in oil production for the state of Wyoming. But with the federal market bias in place, it would lead to somebody that captured or had CO2 available from a CCUS project. The market would push them towards permanent geological sequestration and raise the price in such a way that it would preclude enhanced oil recovery. So to be very clear, this bill is not some type of choice on whether you like carbon capture, whether you support CCUS policy, anything along those lines. It is not trying to make a decision on that. This is a decision on whether you want to eliminate a market bias that is currently in place that steers that CO2 from a CCUS project towards permanent geological sequestration instead of towards enhanced oil recovery. Mr. Chairman, that's very important because I believe there's a lot of thought that this is programmatically trying to lead to a significant growth in CCUS projects. It's relatively neutral on that. What it does is say, if you're doing a CCUS project in the state of Wyoming, we are going to make sure that there's no market bias that leads to that CO2 going into permanent geological sequestration instead of enhanced oil recovery. And with that background, Mr. Chairman, I'm going to walk through the bill. This version is, it's a little bit complicated, I'll say, but it's based on the economics of what that cost differential is in terms of practice. I mentioned it was $85 for permanent, $60 for enhanced oil recovery, but when you look at all of the economics behind it, we need to provide a $10 per ton credit over to the enhanced oil recovery side per ton to level that out. It sounds a little counterintuitive, but it's based on the additional costs associated with transportation and storage and permanent versus the cost in enhanced oil recovery to get that market neutrality. So going through the legislation, we have definitions. This is actually the Wyoming Energy Authority's obligation, as we see here. You see some discussion about definitions in carbon capture, carbon dioxide provider, enhanced oil and gas recovery. And in this case, the enhanced oil recovery in this legislation is very specifically going to turn out to be for CO2-based enhanced oil recovery. It doesn't apply to non-45Q-based recovery. On page 3, you see the stimulus. In the A paragraph, it indicates that the stimulus is going to the CO2 owner. So any carbon dioxide provider may apply for and receive this stimulus in accordance with below. They have to apply to the Wyoming Energy Authority, the authority that we see, to qualify for the stimulus. Going on to page 4, the carbon dioxide shall be captured by the carbon dioxide provider through use of CCUS technology. This recovery shall take place only in Wyoming. This is only a balance for Wyoming-based projects. If the CO2 is out of state, there is no bias in this case, or excuse me, not bias, there's no stimulus provided, no offset. It has to, the crude oil or natural gas produced from enhanced oil recovery, gas and recovery shall be produced using CO2 pursuant to above. So this is a tracking system, right? The CO2 starts in Wyoming, it's from a Wyoming CCUS project, and it goes to an oil and gas project in Wyoming to stimulate oil in Wyoming. So it's all in-house, the stimulus. We're not sending the stimulus out of state at any point. Captured carbon dioxide, this is Romanet 3, provided shall originate within the state of Wyoming, as I mentioned. Romanet 4, the carbon capture, utilization, and storage shall be eligible for receiving a federal tax credit available for 45Q CO2 sequestration. as amended as of January 1st, 2023. So this means that to be eligible for that $10, it has to have already qualified for a 45Q, which means all of those check boxes are in place and the bias is in place. That's an important part of this legislation. We might see another bill later which talks about a general application of a severance tax exemption. But in this circumstance, it's very clear that the 45Q is the triggering mechanism. Romanet 5, the carbon dioxide providers shall qualify for 45Q before receiving the stimulus. Also, what that indicates is that if the 45Q program goes away at the federal level, this bill goes away because you have to qualify for 45Q and get your subsidy on the 45Q side to receive the stimulus. So that necessarily means if the federal program is eliminated, then this does nothing. This is also where we're going to have the amendment that I've already moved. And I'm going to go to the amendment at this point. I'll read it in, but we can have discussion on the amendment after I work through the bill. What the amendment does, there is pending legislation to try to create a balance between those two and raise them both to $85. Our legislative delegation from Wyoming is working on that. So if it becomes equal, that each of them is at $85, this also stops taking effect. That's what Standing Committee Amendment number 1 does. It basically says if the 45Q is equal for both types, this no longer takes effect. You can't get your stimulus. So we'll have some questions on that in a bit, but I want to walk through the bill before taking those questions.
Do you want to dispose of the amendment now with a vote?
I don't think there's enough understanding of the bill yet, so I want to
Proceed.
walk through the rest of the bill,
Proceed.
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead.
save it, and then we'll hit that prior
Okay.
to working the rest of the bill, just so that everybody understands what they're voting on. But this would be an insertion on page 6, line 9, of effectively a new paragraph that adds that information, or excuse me, a new line after that adds that if they do become equal, it goes away as well. That scenario is reasonably likely, but not a certainty. Romanet 6 just indicates that to ensure compliance, the authority may consult with federal or state agencies necessary to approve this stimulus. And then we see in the B paragraph that the stimulus amount is equal to $10 for every 1 ton of carbon dioxide. That, and this is reiterating some of the previous points, 1 is used for enhanced oil and gas recovery. Romanet 2 is stored through the enhanced oil and gas recovery that meets the requirements of this section, which basically goes back to 45Q. The C paragraph, the stimulus shall be available to a carbon dioxide provider until the date that the carbon dioxide provider no longer qualifies for 45Q. The D paragraph indicates the stimulus shall be paid from funds in the enhanced oil recovery stimulus account, which is created a little bit later. It comes out of that, and if the funds are insufficient, they're prorated. We'll talk about that fund in a moment. Mr. Chairman, page 6 on to page 7 indicates that the authority shall administer the stimulus and ensure each carbon dioxide provider meets all the qualifications and promulgate rules. The B paragraph indicates that upon determining the carbon dioxide provider's eligibility, they shall report the eligibility to the governor and the state auditor, and then provide for disbursement through the state auditor of the $10 stimulus per ton. Reporting requirements, bottom of C on page 7. On to page 8. There's created the Enhanced Oil Recovery Stimulus Account. I mentioned that. So this is the account that is going to provide the funds that are necessary to stimulate on the production side. If there is no expenditure, all of those funds shall revert in 2034. We expect there to be expenditures, but if the projects that would be potentially eligible fail to come off, then there would be a reversion. Page 9, Department of Revenue shall report those expenditures to Governor, Auditor, the Authority, and Joint Appropriations Committee, Joint Minerals, Business and Economic Development Committee, the amount of severance tax remitted. And then the D paragraph indicates that the state auditor shall transfer the amount calculated into the account. So the way this works on the severance side is for every barrel of oil produced, on the production side, half of the severance, so 3% severance, is going to go back into that stimulus account. That's what funds this. And that's effectively a break-even amount, Mr. Chairman, based on projections. So the $10 per ton of CO2 is going to be equivalent to a 3% severance on the barrel of oil produced. And that's net neutral based on the economic projections. So the total cost then is zero, and you get an additional 3% of severance coming back to the state on these new projects that goes, again, to the state funds pursuant to how the severance tax is distributed. That's an important point, that there's a tremendous amount of revenue associated with this because we have the opportunity for these new enhanced oil recovery programs, and a portion of the severance tax is used to provide the stimulus to the program. You see, funds shall be transferred to the stimulus account based on the above paragraphs. And then in Romanet 2, in Romanet 1 beginning, is discussion of a $10 million balance in the account, and then we'll see an appropriation in a little bit. There is a time lag, which is going to be several years, between the stimulus that occurs and the production that occurs. I'll note at this point, Mr. Chairman, that we've done a lot of CO2 projects in the state of Wyoming, and not a single one of them has failed. We have a 100% batting average on CO2 stimulus for enhanced oil recovery in the state of Wyoming. So when we do one of these projects, it is going to produce more oil, and we can tell how much more oil is going to be produced. We know that. There's a differential oil production, which is based on the CO2 drive, enhanced oil recovery, ends up with production at the wellhead. We know how much that's going to be. We capture the severance, and we put it back into this account. The challenge is the stimulus occurs before the oil production. And that's the purpose of the $10 million appropriation. That was an estimate of how much float was needed as the projects are coming online to start paying the fund back and effectively pay it off. So, Mr. Chairman, you see that in Romanet 2, this fund comes from the legislative reserve account in its initiation, which we'll see down in section 2, and it'll fill back up, and once it reaches $10 million, which was the starting value, everything else pours back into the legislative stabilization reserve account until it pays off the $10 million, effectively. So it's a loan to the account that gets paid off because the cash flow comes after the stimulus. I hope that makes sense. I'm happy to explain that further, but we see in section 2 then that the LISRA is the appropriation source of the $10 million loan to the program, and this appropriation shall be expended only for the purposes provided above. Effective date is July 1st, 2025. So, Mr. Chairman, I'll just note before sitting down, and we'll get to the Standing Committee amendment as the first order of business. This is heavily supported by our oil and gas community as a top priority because they understand how important enhanced oil recovery is for the state of Wyoming, and they see a market bias right now in the carbon dioxide market. They see that CO2 producers and owners through CCUS will likely take their CO2 and inject it into a permanent geological storage because that's what the market is telling them to do. They don't want to do that. Our oil and gas operators don't want that to happen. So our oil and gas operators asked us, the Minerals Committee, for this legislation so that we can remove that market bias. So again, I'll reiterate, it isn't about what anybody in this chamber, any member thinks about whether CO2 is good, bad, indifferent, sideways, whatever the case may be. There is a federal market bias in place. This eliminates that in a way that makes a substantial amount of money for the state of Wyoming that helps keeps our schools open and our streets paved, Mr. Chairman. So I'm happy to answer any questions on the amendment at this time.
So clarification, we are on the amendment. We're on the amendment. Any questions on the amendment? Question being called. All those in, go ahead.
So I've got this bill up, and it doesn't show an amendment on the website.
I got mine on the website.
You did? Honestly, I got it.
I have an amendment attached to it.
Never mind, I'm on 18, I apologize.
Thank you.
Thank you, sorry.
Senator Case. We always appreciate you tracking it. Okay, we have a question on the amendment. All those in favor of standing committee amendment number 1 to Senate File 17, say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. The amendment has passed. We're back on the bill. Go ahead. On the bill, go ahead, Chairman. Let's go to Chairman Anderson and then to Senator Smith in that order.
Mr. Chairman, a couple of things on the testimony that we had for this. We had a lot of testimony from the industry. One of them was that there's 75 potential oil fields to use this CO2 that we're talking about today. So we realize there's a need and we need to get moving on this, and that's why we're proposing to put the 10 million up to get the thing rolling. 75 potential oil fields in Wyoming to do this. Now, all this was done with the previous administration. The new administration, if the Enhanced Energy Recovery Act federal law passes through, this bill isn't necessary, but we're not depending on the feds to get that done and get it through. We need to get it through for our producers right now. Thank you.
Thank you for clarification, Mr. Chairman. Let's go over to Senator Smith. And then, no, change your mind? Okay, let's go back to Senator Landon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't think the average public out there realizes that this is a loan program. I appreciate the senator explaining how this bill is going to work. But that said, even if that money was not repaid in full, I'm curious during the interim if there was talk about what the return on this kind of investment is. If there's any sort of level that we could share back home to say, you know, for $10 million, we're going to, out of these enhanced efforts in these 75 oil fields, we're going to be able to produce X, Y, or Z. I think that might be helpful to us. I think there's quite a bit of misunderstanding on this one. This is an industry that I'm very supportive of, obviously, from where I represent, but just wondering about what kind of return and what kind of enhancement would additional efforts on this front make? Thank you.
Senator Rothfuss, let's hold for a minute, grab a few more. Let's go to Jones. Ooh, wow. Jones, Scott, Cooper, Kolb in that order. Senator Jones.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I do have a little example that was given to us, a small little oil patch over kind of in my neck of the woods. Using enhanced oil recovery, they went from 17 barrels a day to 17,000 barrels a day.
Keep them coming. Senator Scott, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, in response to the question on the return, this is a big money proposition. We can certainly see the example of it working well in the Salt Creek field, which my district, Midwest Way, tremendous increase in the production. We, a couple of years ago, cut figures on what would happen if we could get CO2 recovery in the Big Muddy field, between the Toronto County line and Glen Rock. And the figure there, my memory is that it was $1.6 billion in addition to tax revenue over CO2 in just that particular field. Now you have to be a little careful because there are some things that can go wrong, and one of them is leaking up through, having CO2 just leak out through unplugged wells from the earlier era when those things were not regularly plugged. And certain of the production levels would not work, and we had to exclude those from the calculation. But that field, Mr. Chairman, is a large one, big producer in the early days, but it may be larger than a lot of the other fields that were cited that would benefit from this. But that's an indication of the kind of money that would be available, and you have to look at the revenue from the severance taxes, a small part of which we're giving up for work to finance this equalization of the market forces. But you also have all the property tax revenue, and the royalties, where the state owns school sections that have some of this oil under it, and there's significant ownership there. And that's where you get the big money figures, is the property taxes and ad valorem taxes, that is, and the school royalties, Mr. Chairman. So I can't give you an explicit rate of return, but it is big money over a period of probably 20 years.
Senator Cooper and then Senator Colby in the box. Go ahead, Senator Cooper.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to correct the number that the good senator gave us. It's not 17,000 barrels a day, it's 7,000 barrels a day is the current production on that field that she was referring to. That 7,000 barrels a day currently is generating $10.5 million a year for the state of Wyoming in severance tax. So it would be exempt from this Senate File 17 because it's current production. This would be on anything new, but those kind of success stories are out there, gonna be out there everywhere. As the senator from the Bates Creek area alluded, fields such as Salt Creek or Wirtz or Lost Soldier, the field down in southwest Wyoming, those fields would have been plugged out by today. Instead, they're generating millions and millions of dollars for the state of Wyoming because of enhanced oil recovery. The success stories are huge, and there's that many more. Well, there's 75 fields all across the state right now identified. So this is a big thing for the future of Wyoming. And we don't have enough, we're not gonna have enough CO2 in a few short years to do the work that needs done. So that's why the use end of it, CCSU, the use end of it is so important. And the other things that really need to be considered, 80 to 85% of the oil in these old fields is still in place. It's been, we had primary production on it when we just went out there and maybe did a little fracking and produced the wells. Then the secondary recovery, which is the water flood type projects, all the low hanging fruit is gone. We're down to some pretty high tech stuff there now with the CO2 enhancement. These projects are huge. The dollar amounts are huge. The investment for one little set of property up in the Powder River Basin is estimated right now at $100 million to put it in place. So again, as the good senator from the Ivory Tower discussed, the return is not fast, but it's massive when it gets there. And this is looking past next week. This is looking well into the future and what it's going to do for the state of Wyoming in the next 20, 30 years. Thank you.
Knowledge on the floor, Senator Cole. Then back to Senator Case. Go ahead, Senator Cole.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I'll just start off by saying I'm in favor of using CO2 for enhanced oil recovery. My question revolves around why we developed a stimulus program as opposed to some sort of tax program that we could then counter. The feds give X amount of dollars per ton of CO2. Why wouldn't we have developed a surcharge on using that methodology instead of creating a stimulus program? I don't understand why we didn't go about it in that direction. I hope I'm clear about my question. Question is why did we choose this route? Was there something that prohibited us from then putting a surcharge on the other methodologies and possibly even increasing the surcharge to make this method more feasible economically? I'd like to get an answer about just how we came to this point and why this was our best choice. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Roth is keeping notes. Let's go back to Senator Case and then to Senator Boner. Go ahead, Case.
Thank you,
Senator
Mr.
Case.
Chairman. So this technology is being used now. There are a few fields that have employed it. My understanding is CO2 is kind of hard to find, but CO2 might be more easier to find in the future depending on the technologies that are employed to recover CO2. Although whether we can use that or not is going to depend on whether the federal government will allow that CO2 that's captured to be used for enhanced oil recovery or not. And so that's a big if. If they say, no, you can't use it for enhanced oil recovery, that means that you have to kind of buy it, and a recoverer of CO2, a direct air capture or whatever deal they got going, would have a choice of putting it in the ground, permanent sequestration, and getting the federal tax money, or possibly participate in a trading program where private entities have put up money to sequester CO2, or not take that money, but use it for enhanced oil recovery. I kind of get that that's going, and this is tilting the scale towards the enhanced oil recovery, having a stimulus fund where we're going to kind of encourage them to do that. $10 million is still a lot of money. Now, I could see maybe in the future, someone will come with a legislative proposal to say now the oil that comes out from the enhanced recovery should get a lower severance tax so that we could, because of all these costs. So it's a kind of a double dipping thing, you know? But the point that exists out there right now is they're already beginning to employ this technology. We don't have to pay for it. It's maybe slow to go. But we have a different administration in that crazy far city on the Delaware River that, you know, I would suppose would be drill baby drill, and maybe would support CO2 instead of being sequestered permanently, but could be used for this program. So shouldn't we not give the money away before that happens? That's one question. And then if this is the best way to find petroleum, and it brings all these benefits from 7 barrels a day to 7,000, that's a pretty big jump. That's worth a lot of money. Why do we have to pay for that? And I'll bet down the road sometime somebody's going to propose a severance tax break for that oil that's produced in that manner. And why would we do that too? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Boner, Senator Steinmetz, in that order, by the way, you stood up. Senator Boner and then Senator Steinmetz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate the work of the committee. And my question revolves around the amendment that we just passed. So, contemplating that, we don't know what the future is necessarily with the changes back east. And it could be entirely possible that sooner rather than later, we have just as much tax credits for enhanced oil recovery as we do for deep sequestration. I'm wondering if the committee considered the possibility that instead of totally closing that $25 a ton gap, if we had some sort of partial closure. It seems to me that right now it's sort of an all or nothing proposal where, say, you don't know how things are going to go back east, say instead of that $25 gap suddenly shrinks to a $5 gap per ton. It's not completely eliminated. We still be having a $10 tax credit, and would, potentially would be better off having sort of a proportional scale based off of the remaining gap if possible. So just a thought, don't want to speculate too much on what our federal partners are going to do, but I'm just wondering if there's any discussion in the committee.
Senator Steinmetz, then let's work our way back to Senator Rothfuss to wrap this up. Senator Steinmetz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and the previous speaker in the back corner said some of my things. Free market solutions always seem to be best, and if there is that much of an increase, you would think folks would be willing to pay for that. But the other part about that is the endangerment finding with the EPA is being reviewed as we speak. The administration, the new administration, is having them review those 6 key greenhouse gases. CO2 is one of them, and so it could be managed completely different in the future. I know this bill takes a little bit of that into account, but I'm just not sure why we would want to go down this road. If you could help me out on that, I would sure appreciate it with all of this in flux. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Well, okay. Senator Rothfuss, be patient a little bit. We're going to go to the president because he's the president first, and then to you, Senator Hicks. Go ahead.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Boy, this is a tough one for me, because on one hand, I see the 45Q thing as just the scam that it is, but it's the operation we're running under right now. And I also see that I would much rather have that CO2 that's being captured being used for something good other than just stored in the ground permanently. and people making money off of that, because that's a racket in itself. So if we can figure out a way to make this work where that CO2, instead of being permanently sequestered, is being used for tertiary recovery, and it sounds like that's what we're doing here. My question is, so you've got me to that point. I could probably support this, but what happens to the people that are, there's always winners and losers when you get in these government tax schemes like this. What about the folks that have already done this and are doing it now? Are there probably, I'm guessing the answer is no, sorry, this is only for new projects that are blessed by the 45Q program. Is there any discussion on helping the people out that are already doing this and those that are, have done it up to this point? So hopefully that makes sense.
Senator Hicks.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, a question I come with is how did we derive this $10 a ton is miraculously going to create all this opportunity under it? So why not 20? Wouldn't that double the amount of CO2 sequestration and double the amount of oil production? And so where's the economics behind $10 as the threshold that all of a sudden this is going to create all of this, spur this economic activity? So that's a question. But Mr. Chairman, what I'm really curious is I don't see a provision in the bill, and I always come back and say, past performance doesn't guarantee future returns. Something that I think people in the investment world clearly understand. So where's the provision in the bill? Let's say we invest whatever, $2 million on a CCU project, and it doesn't result in an increased production for whatever reason. Could be geology, could be the project died at the end, somebody sold, they backed out of it. Where do we, in the case of a failure or it doesn't produce all of the increased oil production, where do we get made whole as the state of Wyoming? And so two things: why is $10 magical? And where's the provision that says if we invest this money and it doesn't happen, we don't see those increases to offset that original loan to make the state whole? Where's that at?
Senator Rothfuss, you should have a whole notebook full of responses.
I sure do, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, going back all the way back to the beginning, the good senator from Natrona County, the first factor is the idea that obviously this isn't a loan program, but one of the questions was, or is more of a loan program than an expenditure. We'll get to some of the details on that in a minute, but getting back to the total amount and how much this might be, which was a couple of the early questions. So the recommendation and the structure was done by the state's Enhanced Oil Recovery Institute and School of Energy Resources, and we have some professors over there in economics that did the economic analysis to figure out what the relative costs were. So the $10 is not pulled out of a hat. We pull a lot of things out of hats, we know that in legislation. This one time, that $10 was not just a number that a bunch of us sitting at a conference table came up with and said that ought to do it. It is based on the analysis, and I can circulate the report that provided the analysis behind that based on some assumptions, but that should be a balancing factor. Getting to the total amount, though, there were 4 projects that our Enhanced Oil Recovery Institute contemplated as high likelihood projects in the near future, and basically modeled out what the return would be if those projects came online in the near future. So the assumptions are that the projects would go forward and there was CO2 available. So those assumptions might not take place, but they used them for the estimated analysis. And if those would go forward, it does end up being quite a bit. Getting to from 2031 to 2040, a few years out, those are the peak years where it averages about $178 million in revenue per year. That's versus the $10 million slush fund that starts it out, which again is paid back. So that's pretty significant. $178 million per year versus the $10 million seed funding. Not bad, if you can get it, Mr. Chairman. And that's not the entirety. There's lesser funds in the beginning and the end as it tails out. Why this? Why this approach as opposed to a severance tax exemption? Well, it turns out that in a few short minutes, we'll be talking about the possibility of a severance tax exemption, which candidly I think is a bad idea. And these were some competing concepts that came through the Minerals Committee. We contemplated the idea of, well, what if we just gave a 3% severance tax exemption? And the answer is that drives up the price in the marketplace. Everything else drives up the price in the marketplace. This stimulus does not drive up the price in the marketplace, and therefore you don't have the market bias further influencing. You actually keep it at its current market level. That was an important factor. That was something that was being requested because a lot of the CO2 trading is a regional trading system. So what we're trying to do is simply de-bias the system between permanent geological sequestration and enhanced oil recovery, as opposed to adding fees. And if we added fees, Mr. Chairman, in the state of Wyoming, you can rest assured that by adding additional fees in the state of Wyoming, we just wouldn't have enhanced oil recovery through CO2 in the state of Wyoming. That would be how that would turn out, because it would be less expensive to do the EOR with the CO2 in the next state over. So we talked about a lot of different scenarios. There's a reason why our economics professors with the School of Energy Resources came up with this regrettably complicated system instead of a simple, let's write a check. Writing a check would be easier. We do it all the time, but it turned out not to work in the way that we wanted it to work. So there was some method to this madness. To my good friend from the Lander area, talking about the fact that we're already employing it and that we have other alternatives like the tax exemption. Enhanced oil recovery through CO2 injection has been around for a long time, about as long as I have, probably even longer, and was used extensively in the 80s, but they're getting a lot better at it at this point in time. And they know when they have a candidate field, they know what conditions it's going to operate under. And as we noted earlier, you do testing beforehand to make sure that your reservoir characteristics are appropriate, and you hit a home run every time if the reservoir characteristics are appropriate. So it's not a, this might hit, this might miss. It is a, yes, this is a candidate field, and therefore it will succeed. The Enhanced Oil Recovery Institute has as its mission basically characterizing these reservoirs for folks in the state of Wyoming, and so there are a number of candidate fields. There are areas of the state that would benefit tremendously, like the basin, from having access to CO2 floods. We don't have any pipelines going there, and you know, that's a challenge for the future, Mr. Chairman, but we know that this is a way of helping our producers and helping the revenue for the state of Wyoming. The idea that the market will take care of this, you can't have simultaneously a massively biased marketplace and then say that the market will take care of it. We've already got tremendous intrinsic market bias due to the 45Q. 45Q has provided an incentive to say, don't use enhanced oil recovery, which is eligible, right? That is currently eligible for 45Q, but at $60 per ton of CO2 utilized, not 85. So as the producer or operator that has the CO2, when I go to the market, I see $85 over here guaranteed, I'm going to get my $85 per ton. That's a tremendous amount of money. And to be clear, oil and gas operators are not paying 45Q rates and haven't traditionally in the past. They don't want to be competing with 45Q in this rather biased way. I think they'd prefer to go back to that free market if they could, but that's not where we're operating, and this provides the de-bias, Mr. Chairman. The concept from the good senator from Converse County about, well, what if it goes partial? Honestly, we didn't really consider that because it's pretty recent legislation. We were bringing legislation to address an existing legislative gap at the federal level between 85 and 60. We see new legislation introduced rather recently as a proposal to make them equilibrated. We wanted to amend to that to recognize that there is a reasonable probability, Mr. Chairman, of this bill going away and therefore, or this bias going away and therefore the necessity going away. So we took the simple action. It's not to say it's out of the question that we could come up with a calculation to provide a load balancing or something along those lines, but we did not take that into consideration. If the good senator is interested in amending accordingly, there's no objection to that. That's a fair point. To my good friend from the eastern part of the state, free market is best. We talked a little bit about the fact that we don't have a free market, and that's just the reality of it. It's a biased marketplace with a significant bias that leads to a use for permanent geological storage instead of for enhanced oil recovery. That will be perfectly empowering and enabling for anybody that wants to do carbon capture, utilization, and storage. They will just sign up for a project to directly inject it into permanent storage. They'll have no worry, and they'll make plenty of money. So this, from their perspective, the current system is spectacular. It is an absolute victory for permanent geological storage, and those companies that do CCUS will thrive all day and all night at $85 per ton. If we take no action, they'll be just fine. But, Mr. Chairman, the Minerals Committee was more concerned about the oil and gas operators and making sure that the oil and gas operators were made whole and had access to the CO2 market on a level basis, trying to get to that free market, right? We're trying to provide a stimulus that creates a free market experience to the best of our ability within our constraints. To the good president's discussion about 45Q, I know the good president doesn't like 45Q. We've had that conversation before. But what happens to folks doing it now? Only new ones. It's not about new in this one. And there are concerns with new versus old to some degree in the next one also. It's, are you eligible for 45Q? That's it. If you're not eligible for 45Q on your CO2 production, your market is not a biased marketplace. So we have the free market at that point in time. You don't get 45Q, our operators will buy. We have access to that. So if you are eligible for 45Q, whether you're an existing operation, you've been around for a while, you're getting your 45Q, you're moving towards it, you've signed all the contracts and the permits, you're eligible for this. So it's not just new projects, it's existing, but you've got to qualify for the 45Q to get it. And so it can be through through permanent geological or through this program. So to be clear, it's not going to be limited just on new projects, but it is CO2 sourced in Wyoming that is eligible for 45Q. And finally, to the good senator from Carbon County, how did we derive the $10? I mentioned that a few minutes ago. We have a detailed report that I can circulate that gets at those calculations. And regarding whether or not there's a provision for a kick-out, if we, the possibility of losing our $10 million. The $10 million, as I mentioned, is a float. So you start and you start cycling back in. If it's failing, they cut the project off. You have to realize these are oil and gas operators. They don't spend a lot of time injecting CO2 and failing because it costs them a lot more than $10 million. They drilled the well. They've probably invested close to $10 million in the initial point where they've gotten to the well. So we're not the high-risk enterprise in this. If they're going to bring on a CO2 flood, it's going to be a successful CO2 flood. And if it turns out to start off not successful, they don't keep dumping in CO2 because the oil field operator is the entity that is most on the line for the financial risk. And so the moment they see that this is going dry, they're going to shut down. And so we effectively have that backstop as well, where we won't be paying for the 45Q credits to go down a hole for a dry well downstream. So you've got mitigated risk and the fact that we have a 100% batting average. This is a sure thing if we have a project come online. And Mr. Chairman, the only risk I see is, does a project come online that brings these ideas together? And there's no financial risk to that. We've just got $10 million sitting in a pool that doesn't get spent, and it reverts at the end of its lifetime. So, Mr. Chairman, I understand and appreciate all the concerns. This is something we worked extensively. I hope the body will support it. This is the best way we could come up with to minimally bias the marketplace, provide an appropriate stimulus that allows our oil and gas operators to compete in the CO2 market and ensure that we have the opportunity to enjoy enhanced oil recovery wherever we can stimulate the state of Wyoming without having to pay too much for that CO2. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Ready for the question? Let's go back to Chairman Anderson first. Go ahead, Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, a couple of things. This is not a wildcat operation. This is existing fields. These 75 fields are existing fields that we're just going to come in and flood with CO2. They may have been flooded with water before. Now we're going to flood them with CO2. The operator knows what he can get in returns. In the bigger fields, like one north of Casper there, they return 15% right off the bat. Now, you heard the one in Sweetwater County went a lot more than that. Now, they know what they're going to get if they flood the field with CO2. The problem we have is getting the CO2 to them. We don't have the pipelines to get the CO2 to them, so we're trying to help that it goes to EORI, not to sequestration. And we want them to produce more out of their oil fields. Those 75 potential oil fields, we'll get the estimates on that. I know the industry has the estimates on that of what each one of those fields will produce if they flood them. And I would submit to you that it won't take but just one medium-sized field to pay us back entirely. So we'll get that information back to everyone, though. Thank you.
Appreciate the follow-up. Senator Scott, and then we better go to a question. Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, further in support of the bill, one of the things we need to understand is that there aren't a lot of other CO2 sources. The only ones being used now that I'm aware of is the one Sublette County going through the LaBarge processing plant, Jonah Field, I think it's called. And that has a lot of CO2 in with the natural gas. That's unusual. That's the only one that's being used now that is available to Wyoming operators. There may be enough CO2 in the field in the vicinity of Lysite, although it's not enough to have attracted the private industry right now. And that's it. There isn't commercial amounts of CO2 in the rest of our natural gas supply. So this enhanced, the CO2 from carbon capture projects that the feds are pushing through this 45Q that they've been talking about is the only other source that's potentially available to us, Mr. Chairman, as far as I can tell. And that makes a big difference. You can't just say, well, the free market will take care of it, because the free market has to have a source, and it doesn't.
Thank you. Ready for the question? Question being called. All those in favor of Senator Anderson's motion that when the Committee of the Whole rises to report, that to do so with a favorable recommendation of Senate File 17. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. No. Ayes have it. Senate File 17 is passed the Committee of the Whole. Next bill up for consideration is Senate File 18.
Senate File 18, Enhanced Oil Recovery Severance Tax Exemption, an act relating to mined product taxes, sponsored by the Minerals Committee. It was referred to Committee Number 9. Return to committee recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Senators Anderson, Cooper, Jones, and Nethercott. No, Senator Rothfuss. Senator Anderson, Chairman. Was re-referred to Committee Number 2 to return to committee recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Senators Driscoll, Guru, Larson, Salazar, and Smith. Senator Salazar, Chairman.
Chairman Anderson, and you do have an amendment. Go ahead, sir. Oh, no, you don't have one on this one, sorry.
No. No, that was Senator Case.
Yeah, see, Senator Case is throwing me off here. Okay, go ahead, Senator Anderson.
Mr. Chairman, I move that when the Committee of the Whole rises to report, it do so with the recommendation that Senate File 18 do pass. And to explain this bill is Senator Cooper.
Senator Cooper, it's all yours.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm going to plead guilty of not realizing I was in charge of this bill. So if you give me just half a second here,
Sure.
I'll pull it up.
No problem.
Perhaps the good senator would like to speak for a minute while I'm doing this. Do you have anything?
Chairman Anderson, you want to offer a little ground cover and pull that up?
This bill, Senate File 18, relates to mine product taxes, providing an exemption for the production of crude oil and natural gas produced through enhanced oil recovery techniques and using Wyoming carbon dioxide, specifying conditions for the exemption, requiring reports, providing definitions, making conforming amendments, and providing for an effective date. I think we have it in exemptions, what is exempt, carbon capture utilization, all of this comes from Wyoming places and is used in Wyoming. Exemption, you got a complete application. We said it would be used for crude oil and natural gas production by means of enhanced oil and natural gas recovery satisfies the conditions of this subsection. That's about the bill, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Senator Cooper, you want to offer any backup?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I apologize for that. This kind of goes hand in hand with that last bill, but not so much as what you might think. This actually gives the oil producer an exemption and an incentive to move forward on these projects and a little bit of help with that front-end cost. Like I said a little while ago, some of these costs are well in excess of $100 million for these, even the smaller to medium-sized projects. The bigger projects, you're probably looking at, $300–400 million for them. They're extensive long-term projects. And again, we're trying to get this CO2 into production to keep these old fields in production. So the idea is, let's be producing oil rather than plugging fields out. If we do have to plug these fields out and we can't incentivize these operators to continue working, this CO2 is going to go into sequestration, which is great for some areas of the state, like over in the county to the north of here, there's approximately 1 billion tons of potential storage in their geological storage in that county just to the north. It's a massive thing for this part of the state, but that doesn't bring the oil and gas back online. These old fields are, some of them as much as 100 years old. They need a good shot in the arm. The enhanced oil recovery projects work. It returns money to the state rather than simply sequestering the CO2. So your favorable consideration.
Thank you. Further discussion on Senate File 18? If not, are you ready for the question? Senator Rothfuss.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. So to be clear, this is a 50% reduction in severance tax straight up for enhanced oil recovery projects in Wyoming. Doesn't require 45Q, it's much broader. And I think it's important to realize that existing projects would be covered as this is written. So any ongoing operation would get a 50% severance tax reduction. These are some of the reasons why I voted against it. As noted, we had a little more sophisticated approach, which is far more complicated, but this was another bill that we had worked over the last couple of years. It does not lead to a debiasing of the market. It actually leads to a bit of a skew in the market, which is one of the concerns I had. It probably, is useful to contemplate both of these and continue the debate on both of these. I will eventually vote against it, but the concern I have is that this policy overall is a policy discussion that needs to continue. I think there are amendments to this bill that could certainly help it. It is requiring, obviously, operators be in Wyoming and that the CO2 source be from Wyoming, so it has that going for it. But one thing I need to point out, Mr. Chairman, is at the end of the game, the legislature does not want to pass both of these. It's the same money, right? You can only have half the severance to pay once, so to speak. If you pass them both, the severance tax goes to zero, if everyone did their math right. So there was never an intent by the Minerals Committee to have both of these pass. It really was a decision largely by the former chairman to ensure that both options were on the table for the legislature, the simple severance tax, eliminate or cut, 50% cut, or the stimulus package. You can obviously see the benefit of the fact that this piece of legislation has no associated appropriation, for example. So it was deemed to be more palatable for that, and that's accurate. Everyone likes a $0 appropriation. But at the same time, you lose a lot of the nuance in not having that appropriation, and you lose a lot of the market factors that the other one accounts for, and this one doesn't. So I just wanted to provide that context. As I said, I was a no in committee and will continue to be a no on this, but it still targets the same concerns of trying to find a way to provide the incentive and account for that extra money. In this circumstance, the operator would receive a roughly equivalent incentive of around $10, which in theory, through the market, could accommodate the $10 bias over on the CO2 producer side if there were a contracted agreement. So, Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to provide that little bit of context. I wanted everyone to understand this, and again, to reiterate that while it would be fine for our body to pass out both bills, it is critically important that both bills do not end up passing the full legislature.
Further discussion? Let's go Cooper Boner in that order. Senator Cooper. Sorry, I was going who stood up first. Senator Cooper.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to respond to what the gentleman just said. Both of these bills do similar things. One returns to the generator of the CO2, the other returns to the oil and gas operator. The previous bill we talked about, we need to be real clear on that. There's potential legislation being considered in the Far East right now to deal with what we just dealt with. So we can sit here on our assets and do absolutely nothing and wait for the feds to do it, or we can move forward with one or the other of these bills. My personal preference is this bill, but both of them are good, solid bills.
Senator Boner, thanks for your patience. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just had a question regarding the fiscal note. I understand we're going to be taking a hit here, and based off the Craig estimate, that's noted for the next 2 or 3 fiscal years in the fiscal note. But I'm just wondering, I understand we don't want to get too presumptuous in trying to predict the increases in production, and that's not reflected at all, especially the increased revenue from that increased production, even if it's only at 3% instead of 6% severance tax. But I'm wondering if maybe there's some discussion or attempted analysis at what this would do to incentivize more production. Do we have a guess as to how this may increase production on the activity that is receiving this tax break?
Further discussion? Further discussion? Okay, let's wrap it up. Senator Rothfuss.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to answer that last question, we really don't have any estimate or reason why this would lead to anything new. That was one of the other concerns. I mean, effectively, in my eyes, it's just a tax cut. It's cutting the tax in half for these CO2 flood projects. Theoretically, that could lead to more capital, but there's no requirements of anything beyond that. And so we know that there would be an immediate fiscal note just based on the fact that you've effectively cut in half the revenue that we're currently getting from eligible barrels of oil that would be being produced by a CO2 flood.
Further discussion there being, Senator Scott.
Mr. Chairman, am I right in thinking that with this bill, you're going to get a lot more enhanced oil recovery projects that are going to get the exemption, including a bunch that are going to occur anyhow? And that this bill, to achieve the same sort of production incentives, is going to be a good deal more expensive in terms of reduction in state revenue than the preceding one.
Okay, Senator Cooper. And then back to Chairman Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Without a really good incentive, I think a lot of these projects are not going to move forward because they are so expensive. They've got to see a better return in the short term to help them get them off the ground. You know, the question is, do we want 3% of a lot of money or 6% of zero? And that 6% of zero is not that enticing to me. So some of these projects will move forward, there's no doubt. But some of the smaller projects will not because they're just too expensive on the front end. So we really need to help our operators, our oil and gas operators, really understand how they can get a faster return on investment. Thank you.
Chairman Anderson, let's have the chairman wrap it up for us and go back to Senator Case in that order. Go ahead.
Well, Mr. Chairman, we just don't know what the future is. You know, we always are told that if we do this, that this activity is not going to happen. It won't happen unless the legislature grants the reduction in the severance tax. I don't know if I can predict that. I don't know what the future you know, there'll be more CO2 out there. These fields are in a good, secure place, better than countries where it's very difficult to do business. They're worth investing in. We have, you know, great infrastructure. I just kind of, the stuff on the back of my neck goes up when people say, if we don't do this, if we don't grant this tax break, it'll never happen. We don't know that. We just don't. There's a good probability that there will be some level of activity. This might be more if we pass this tax break, but we also forego a lot of opportunities. And we use this revenue, you know, it looks like we're not going to collect any more property taxes anymore, Mr. Chairman, so this might be important revenue. And if we give all the sales taxes to the cities and towns, then we might not have that either. So maybe we ought to keep hold of this one.
Chairman Anderson, you want to wrap this up and then we'll do a question?
The question came up is which one is more expensive? The previous bill is not expensive. It's a $10 million loan that we get paid back by the producers. So that will not cost us any money. We'll get our $10 million back and then the producers will make the money. This one will cost you one half of the severance taxes imposed on such and such. So this one will cost you some money from your severance taxes. And that's ongoing. That isn't just now. And that's for future production. So that's the answer to that. The first one, 17, doesn't cost you any money. This one does.
Thank you. Ready for the question? Question being called. All those in favor of Senator Anderson's motion that when the committee of the whole rises to report that it do so with a favorable recommendation of Senate File 18, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. Senator.
No. Division.
Division being called. All those in favor stand.
Stand up,
Sure we got
yeah.
the Chief Clerk ready? Nine. Those opposed, stand. Way more than nine. Wait. Senate File 18 has failed Committee of the Whole. Oh, yeah, roll call. Excuse me, sorry. Roll call, please. Having failed.
Committee of the Whole roll call, Senate File 18, Anderson? Aye. Aye. Barlow? Aye. Boner? No. Brennan? No. Case? No. Cooper? Aye. Crago? Aye. Crump? No. Dockstetter? Aye. Driscoll? Aye. French? No. Guru? Aye. Hicks? No. Hutchings? No. Ide? No. Jones? Aye. Kolb? No. Landon? No. Larson? No. McEwen? No. Nethercott? No. Olson? No. Pappas? No. Pearson? No. Rothfuss? No. Salazar? No. Schuler? No. Scott? No. Smith? No. Steinmetz? No. President Beitman? Aye. Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. Senate File 18, 9 aye, 22 no.
Senate File 18, having failed a roll call vote pursuant to SR 6-7A, is deemed indefinitely postponed. The next bill up for consideration is Senate File 39. Please read it in. Oh, Senator
Chairman,
Hicks.
Mr. Chairman.
Privilege?
Mr. Chairman, could I have privilege of the floor?
Please do.
Members of the body, I would hope that you could stand and help me welcome a former member from House District 39, which was Sweetwater County, that served in the legislature for 10 years. And after that tenure, he spent a certain amount of time down as Chief of Staff for Governor Freudenthal. If you could please help me welcome Chris Boswell in your back chamber back here.
Mr. Boswell, welcome to the Senate. Welcome back to the Capitol. Senate File 39, read it in.
Senate File 39, automatic transfer of automobile title upon death, an act relating to motor vehicles, sponsored by Senator Olson, was referred to Committee Number 1, which turned to committee recommendation that it do pass amended. Ayes, Senators Craigo, Crum, Hicks, and Olson. Excused, Senator Kolb. Senator Olson, Chairman.
Senator Olson, and there is an amendment on there, so give us some direction along the way. Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I know you were all hoping for another minerals bill, but we're going to go a slightly different direction, and hopefully we won't take too long moving through it, as this is a fairly simple bill. Mr. Chairman, I move that when the committee of the whole rises to report that it do so with the recommendation that Senate File 39 do pass. There is a standing committee amendment, and I'll ask that that be read in at this time.
Read it in.
Senate File 39, Standing Committee Amendment Number 1, page 2, line 15, B4.
Senator Olson.
Thank you, and I will take up that standing committee amendment as I walk through the bill. I'll just note the places that that amendment makes a difference in the bill. I think that will be the easiest way to do it, Mr. Chairman. So, my fellow senators, what this bill does that I bring you is a change really in the way that we deal with titles to vehicles upon the death of someone. Currently, what this really is meant to mirror is a process called a transfer on death deed. I don't know if you're familiar with that or not, but that is a product of state law that says that you can add a beneficiary to a deed. So this doesn't give a person a vested ownership interest in a property, but makes them just a beneficiary upon your passing. It's an excellent way to pass property to, say, children, free of the probate process, but without actually adding them to your title. This is meant to mimic that exact same process, but with a vehicle. So the scenario really that this could affect all kinds of scenarios, but the one that I see it most commonly affecting based on my practice in this area is, someone has a $500 vehicle, their spouse has already passed away, they want to pass it on to their kids, they may not have a will, they can simply fill out this form that I'll walk you through, and they can list their kids on the property and then pass it to them. And part of the reason why that's so important is that without it, it doesn't necessarily mean that you go through a probate, but you still go through an administrative step, most likely called creating an affidavit of collection of and distribution of personal property. Every lawyer might title it slightly differently, but it's an affidavit that transfers the property. And if you've got a $500 vehicle or even a $1,000 vehicle, that affidavit may cost you more than that from an attorney. So you may never get to transfer that property because it's just cost prohibitive to do so. So that's the main area that I see this really affecting people in Wyoming. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I will walk you through the bill. So page 1, bottom of the page, we create a new statute for the transfer on title upon death. And what it does is it calls for a beneficiary designation form. And on page 2, we discuss what that form looks like. It's pretty basic. It includes the manufacturer's model, year, and vehicle identification number. It includes the name of the owner of the vehicle, and then it includes the word transfer on death to, and then who you're transferring, who is the beneficiary, and then the signature of the owners on the vehicle. So that's the form that you create. Important to note, you're not changing anything on the title during your lifetime. You're just using this separate form to designate a beneficiary. This is a place where the amendment comes into work, Mr. Chairman. It does two things. One, it actually requires a notary on the signature of the owner. And then the second thing is it requires that once you've completed this form, that you go down to your county clerk and you record it. And that's how we're going to know that it's the official document. Bottom of the page talks about what happens upon death. Bottom of the page, going over to page 3, tells us that when somebody passes away, you provide proof of their death. That's a death certificate. You provide the fee, whatever that may be, and then you provide your form. And once you've done all of that, the property, the vehicle transfers into your name. You pay for a new title. Bottom of page 3, very important here, actually middle of page 3, subsection C, really important here, folks. It says that it is subject to any lien, security interest, etc., shall issue a new certificate of title to the beneficiary subject to the lien and security interest. I think that's really important. We had a lot of questions in committee regarding that, and the way this is structured is the lien travels with it. That's the second part of the amendment, is we added language very specific to this to make it a little more clear. We said that the property passes subject to all conveyances, assignments, contracts, liens, security pledges, and other encumbrances. And then you take the title subject to any interest in the property of which the grantee beneficiary has either actual or constructive notice of. Page 4, not a whole lot going on here. At the bottom of the page, it tells you that the owner can revoke this at any point in time. So once they've created it, they've recorded it, they change their mind, they just file a revocation of it, or recorded revocation, sorry. Number 5, more lien language here. It tells us that the interest of the beneficiary in the vehicle is subject to any contract of sale, assignment, lien, ownership, or security interest in which the deceased owner or owners were subject. So if you get any questions from bankers or credit unions or the like, you can safely say that when this vehicle transfers to the beneficiary, it goes with the lien. Bottom of page 5 says that a will can't affect this. That's just basic law. Transfers outside of the probate and will process by beneficiary designation. It's called a will substitute. 6, top of page 7 brings in the Department of Transportation. The Department of Transportation is actually the entity that will create at cost the form and provide the form to the county clerk. So there'll be a uniform form that will be used throughout the state of Wyoming. Bottom of page 7 is just existing language amending the new statute into it. Same conforming on 8 and 9. And page 10, section 3 brings in rulemaking authority to the Department of Transportation to make any rules necessary to implement this act. And that is the bill, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Senator Olson, what do you want to do with the amendment? Do you want to move it?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Thank you very much. I would, did I move it at least?
No, it's read in but not moved.
Okay, I remove Standing Committee Amendment number 1 to Senate File 39 and do ask for your favorable consideration.
Any discussion? All those in favor of Senate File, Standing Committee Amendment number 1 to Senate File 39, all those in favor say aye. Those opposed, nay. The amendment has passed. We're back on the bill. Any further discussion on the bill? Any further discussion on the bill? Are you ready for the question? Question being called. All those in favor of Senator Olson's motion that when the committee of the whole rises to report that it do so with a favorable recommendation of Senate File 39, all those in favor say aye. Those opposed, nay. File is passed, the bill has passed the Senate. Next bill up for consideration, Senate File 62, please read it in.
Senate File 62, Restrooms in Publicly Funded Schools 2, an act relating to school districts, sponsored by Senator Larson, was referred to Committee Number 4, which returned to committee recommendation that it do pass amended. Ayes Senators Brennan, Olson, Schuler, and Scott. No Senator Rothfuss. Senator Schuler, Chairman.
Senator Schuler, you want to take this, acknowledging that you have an amendment coming up? Go ahead.
You bet. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move that when the Committee of the Whole rises to report it, do so with the recommendation that Senate File 62 do pass. And we have two amendments. Could I have the Standing Committee amendment read in first?
Please read in the Standing Committee amendment.
Senate File 62, Standing Committee Amendment Number 1, page 4, line 4, delete.
Senator Schuler.
Basically, we had a couple of amendments that I think were pretty good. This bill had some issues that we thought we better take care of. 62 just basically goes in and on page 4, it actually, line 17, said originally that at least one adult that had to be employed by the school district of the same sex had to be present. We felt like in some of the small schools, it might be kind of difficult for that. And in fact, a lot of the schools, maybe they, especially the smaller ones, may have one head coach that does the JV and the freshman. And they may not have, especially if they're on the road, someone that would be employed by the school district, maybe other than a bus driver that might be available. So we deleted that. On page 4, after line 22, we inserted also for an adult to render assistance to any student or person requiring assistance because of disability or age, worrying about the fact that if there was someone that, let's say, for instance, had seizures, they were in the locker room, you would want to be able to have your EMTs be able to go in there, and that's what that one's about. The rest of them are pretty much just wordsmithing. Page 7, we deleted school. I think that pretty well explains those. I think once the good chairman or the good senator describes the bill a little bit more, you might be able to understand that a little bit more, but I'm happy to answer any questions on that particular amendment if you'd like.
Madam Chair, do you want to move the Standing Committee amendment?
You betcha. I would love to move Standing Committee Amendment Number 1 to Senate File 62 and ask for your favorable
Any further
consideration.
discussion? Question be called on the amendment? All those in favor say aye. You want to further discuss that? Okay, go ahead. Senator Larson, go ahead.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you. I was hoping I could go through the bill and bring a little discussion on the
Standing Committee?
Yes,
Okay.
on the Standing Committee
And you'll
as I
take care
went.
of, and you'll take care of Committee of the Whole when we get there?
I don't think so. I think
Okay,
that's
go ahead.
someone else.
Okay, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, if I have to go to the amendment first, I would ask that it would be divided, but I was hoping to go through the bill first.
Go ahead with the bill.
Go through the bill? Fantastic. All righty. This bill is brought forward essentially by discussions with my school district, and they're having issues with boys and girls bathrooms. And so it's a big concern for the whole community. And so that's why I'm bringing the bill. I think this affects quite a few of the districts across the state. Some of them already have facilities that may be able to take care of the issue, but a lot of them don't. So that's the main reason for bringing the bill. I'll go through the bill now. It creates a new statute, 213137. In that statute, at the very beginning, it gives us definitions. We'll have a definition for a coach, gives us a definition for multi-occupancy restroom or changing room. That term includes, but it's not limited to, school restroom, locker room, changing room, or shower room. Gives a definition for a school-sponsored activity, athletic activity. Gives us a definition for sex. And that definition is coming from our statute 2125-101A4. And sex means the biological, physical condition of being male or female, determined by an individual's genetics and anatomy at birth. And we go on to page 3, section B. We're going to say that this, to ensure privacy and safety, each public school district that serves students in pre-K through 12th grade in the state shall require every multiple occupancy restroom or changing room to be designated as follows: for exclusive use of the male sex or for exclusive use of the female sex. Then we go on to section C, on page 3, line 11. Each public school shall provide a reasonable accommodation to persons who do not wish to use a multiple occupancy restroom or changing room. For purposes of this subsection, a reasonable accommodation shall include a single occupancy restroom or changing room. Then we go on to D, line 19. This section shall not apply to persons entering a multiple occupancy restroom or changing room designated for the opposite sex when entering in any of these following circumstances. And those circumstances are little I for custodial maintenance, repair, or inspection purposes. Obviously, we need to get in there and clean. To render emergency medical assistance, as stated before in the amendment, standing committee amendment, we deleted or there. Little 3I, if a suitable meeting room or area is not available, a coach may enter a locker room before, during, or after school sponsored activities, provided these items are in there. All students present are fully clothed. The coach shall be accompanied by not less than one additional adult at all times. C, if the coach is the opposite sex of the students present, the coach shall be accompanied by at least one adult. We deleted employed by the school district and in the standing committee of the same sex as the students present. In D, the adults present shall not be current high school students, so that'll make sure we have another adult in there. And then in the amendment, we entered item 4 for an adult to render assistance to any student or person requiring assistance because of disability or age. Then we get to page 5. This is kind of the meat of it. Each school district board of trustees shall adopt policies to provide for disciplinary action for persons who refuse to comply with this section. And then F, no school district board of trustees shall adopt a policy contrary to the provisions of this section. And then we get into the meat of it where I kind of have some issues. That's where I'm asking to divide the amendment. And in committee, they took out the penalty, because I think we need a penalty in there. If the boards aren't going to do this, how are we going to force them to do it? So the penalty was to take their accreditation away. That stirs a lot of people up, but when I was talking to my administrator or superintendent in my school, he was saying it was okay, but definitely in committee, he said the opposite to me. So he wasn't worried that they were going to bring a policy, and so he didn't have concerns on this. Then I'll go on to line 14. It says that a parent or a legal guardian of a student enrolled in and physically attending public school shall have a cause of action, which I am very excited that it was left in there. And then you go on to page 6, and we're still dealing with the accreditation. It would be the duties of the State Board of Education. Quite a bit of that was deleted. And then we do go to bottom of page 6, duties of the Board of Trustees. It says the Board of Trustees, each school district shall do these things. We go to line 1, ensure that each school district in the state requires every multiple occupancy room or changing room to be designated for the exclusive use of the male sex or the exclusive use of female sex. And in the standing committee amendment, there's a little bit deleted after that on line 4, line 5, 6, and 7. So I guess that takes care of my description of the bill.
So how do you want to address the amendment part now?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to divide the amendment on the First Amendment 1, line 1 through line 8.
Is Division A.
And Division 2 is line 10 through 24.
Division 2, 10 through 24?
Yes, and I'm,
Yeah.
yes, it is. And I'm hoping that'll be okay.
1 through 8 is Division A, skipping line 9. Maybe we just go 9 through 24 for Division B. Absent objection, everybody understand what we're doing here? Do you want to call for question on your first one?
Mr. Chairman, I would ask,
Okay, repeat one more time. Division A, this is on Standing Committee Amendment Number 1 to Senate File 62. Division A, 1 through 8. Division B, 9 through 24.
Mr. Chairman, I would ask that you vote aye on the first division, Division A, I
Discussion
guess.
on the first division. Did you move this then?
Uh,
Move Division A?
Oh, I need to move it? I
Yes.
move Division A
Yeah, move Division A.
to Standing Committee Amendment Number 1 to Senate File 62.
Senator Rothfuss? Go ahead.
So I had stepped out, and I don't know if the entire amendment was moved, but either the entire amendment was moved, in which case, everything's already moved and everything's just fine.
Correct,
So
okay.
It looks like.
I overshot the entire amendment being moved. We're back on Division A.
Okay.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, I'm on Division A, and I would recommend an aye vote.
Any further discussion on Division A? Any further discussion? Senator Case?
So, Mr. Chairman, I'm looking at that amendment. It says that you can help someone with, an adult could go in the restroom or locker room to help someone with a disability. I get that. But if you come under that clause, do you have to have the sex ratios that were talked about earlier, or is it any adult? It's not clear to me. You see what I'm trying to say on that?
Right.
Okay.
Take it back to Senator Larson. I'm not sure that we can do this, Senator Larson. Want to answer?
Mr. Chairman, I would guess, I'm saying you do not need, that's an exception to the rule on who can enter that room.
Okay, any further discussion? Voted up or voted down. Senator Case, then Senator Steinmetz.
Well, Mr. Chairman, this is where this all gets kind of complicated. I mean, you can think of a disabled person being in a more communal locker room, and the person can go in and take care of the disabled person. And I'm not laughing about the disability. I'm just saying it's really difficult to write all these rules. And so I don't think you want that to happen. I don't think that's the intention, but it kind of reads that way.
Senator Steinmetz?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just have questions on that too, because we have a lot of paras working with disabled children in our school systems. I want to make sure that we have that exactly right so that they can continue to, for example, my grandson has a female para that takes him to the bathroom on a regular basis. So yeah, I just want to make sure we cover that.
Before we go back to Senator Larson, anything else? Senator Larson, there are some concerns. Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, if you go to page 3, line 19, we're in section D. This section shall not apply to persons entering a multiple occupancy restroom or changing room designated for use by the opposite sex when entering in any of these following circumstances. And what was added at the bottom would be number 4, little I4, or V, for an adult to render assistance to any student or person requiring assistance because of disability or age. So if you're entering on that reason, you are exempt.
Okay, any further discussion on that? We'll take it up for vote. If not, is there a question on the amendment? Question being called. All those in favor of Division A of Senate File, Standing Committee Amendment Number 1 to Senate File 62, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. No. Division A passed. Division B, you want to explain it? Yes. Senator, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Division B or 2, it just incorporates the whole idea of a penalty. And the Standing Committee Amendment took out the whole penalty. And the penalty was that if you did not do this as a board, you would lose your accreditation. I really do think that there ought to be a penalty there. And so I would ask that you vote no on this division.
Okay, further discussion? Let's go Senator Olson and then to Senator Drew. Go ahead, Senator Olson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm gonna have to push back from my good friend, the senator from Park County. There's a couple of things here that I want to note. Number one is, you don't have to think of this as if you have this language and you have a penalty, or you remove this language and you don't have a penalty, because that's not entirely accurate. By removing subsection G and removing the accreditation penalty, we still keep subsection H. Subsection H is really the important penalty, if you will, because what it is a private right of action. So a parent still has a private right of action against a public school who is in non-compliance with the statute. So there is a way to enforce the statute. But deleting G is critical. It is the deletion of the accreditation loss. And so if you uphold this, if you vote against this division, what you're saying is that you think it's okay for one of your schools to lose their accreditation. And that might be a little too strict, because as you can imagine, you're going to have, this policy is pretty strict, and you're going to have instances where it could casually be violated, maybe not even intentionally, but casually violated, and then a school is held responsible for someone who wandered into the wrong bathroom or whatever it may be, and their entire accreditation could be at stake. So the committee chose to remove this because they felt like it was a little too strict. We also heard testimony from the associations that represent superintendents, that represent school boards, that represent schools. And there's a general consensus that would push too far in the bill. I didn't get the same sense with the private right of action from those who testified. So I think you can rest assured that you still have a way to enforce the statute under subsection H, even if you vote for this division and eliminate the loss of the accreditation standard. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Senator Grew?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm just trying to think this one through, so it kind of leads me to a question. So if this rule is violated, we're going to lose my high school. If it happened in my district, my high school or my grade school would lose its accreditation. That sounds pretty serious. I think that means we don't have school anymore. And so, hundreds, maybe thousands of people or kids are going to not be able to go to school. My question is, for the bringer of this, this obviously is a problem in your district. You said that coming off. So could you tell me how many times this has happened in your district that has caused this kind of bill or this kind of an amendment to come down the pike? You said there was a lot. It said it's happening, and I believe it is serious, and I believe it's. But I got to go home and tell my school district that we're going to impose this rule on them from the state level, because we're not like local control anymore. So now we're going to do this. How many of you have, because I want to be able to tell them how many cases have happened that this has happened in your district, so I can explain it to them, please. Thanks.
Okay, let's go to Senator French. Go ahead, Senator.
Mr. Chairman, may I kind of refer to that? I've got a kind of a statement here that I wrote down. It won't take long. It's the background of how we got to this point.
Does it pertain to the amendment, Senator? Division B
Yeah,
of
it
the
does.
amendment?
Yeah,
Okay.
I think so.
All right, go ahead.
If not, cut me off.
Well, keep your eye on me then.
I want to give some background on Senate File 62, the Good Bringers bill. Parents in my neck of the wood were telling me the area school district was not listening to their concerns on this issue. Anger and frustration from parents and students is originally how all of this got started. After months of complaints, the area district was compelled to consider a resolution at a board meeting in November, this last November.
Senator, I think you're pertaining to the bill more than the amendment.
I'm getting.
Are you close to the end? I want you to
getting
come
there.
back and read this on the bill, I think is what we want.
All right.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Senator Larson, do you want to respond to those two senators prior to that? And then Senator French would like to have a response to the bill.
And I might have forgot.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, I might have forgot the first question, but I do remember the question over here. It was asked how many times. Our superintendent, I don't know, he threw out some numbers. I should have wrote them down better. I think it was above 25, could be up to 50. But at our school, they are having issues. And they said during the committee meeting, they are not going to pass a policy until the state does something. They want guidance from us. And so that's why I'm bringing it. But I would still go back to my division.
And you had a previous statement too up here to answer? No, one of the first ones. Did you cover both of those responses?
I don't remember the first one, sir, Mr. Chairman. There, I don't remember.
Okay, just more statement. All right, we're just double checking. Go ahead.
Okay, I would encourage a no vote on this. I really do think we need some teeth in the bill.
Clarification, no vote on Division B. Ready for the question? Question on Division B of Standing Committee Amendment Number 1 to Senate File 62. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay.
No.
Division 2 has failed. Division B. Division B has failed. Oh, standing count. Yeah, division. Oh, yeah, sorry. So many divisions. What it is. Pursuant to our rules. We're on the amendment, okay. All right, Division B on the amendment. Ayes first. Ayes 21. Nay? Stand for nay? And we'll let them count anyway. Nays 11. Division B has failed. So many divisions. Go ahead.
Yeah, I believe 21 is
Excuse
greater
me,
than
yes,
7.
I'm sorry. Thank you for the catch. Division B has failed, or has passed. Now we are back on the bill. Senator French, thank you for your patience. Go ahead. You have a statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll try this again. It's kind of after the fact now, but I want to give some background on the Senate File 62. Parents in my neck of the woods were telling me the area school district was not listening to their concerns on the issue. Anger and frustration from parents and students is originally how all this got started. After months of complaints, and I'll say that again, after months of complaints, the area district was compelled to consider a resolution at a board meeting in November. Over 150 people attended that school board meeting. I was one of them. I was there in the room. And this district made clear the public that they wanted the state to deal with the issue. At the November area school board meeting, there were at least 2 cops present, and that was a huge insult to the parents and community members in that room. My constituents want to see female spaces protected. We need to have uniformity and consistency across the state, so when students travel, the expectations are the same everywhere. Testimony during the Senate Education Committee meeting showed exactly why we need some teeth in this bill. A person would never lobby against penalties unless they didn't plan to enforce the rules. We need to pass this bill. It needs to have some teeth in it. The teeth were taken out, so take it for what it's worth.
Thank you for that. Senator Garou, let's go to that, and then we still have a committee of the whole to deal with. Do you want to respond to that? Senator Garou?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, thanks. I'm a little confused still, but it's becoming clear. So what I just heard is that the folks in one area, after months of complaints, went to a school board meeting to which was attended. Some police attended, for what reason, I don't know. Maybe they were there to speak on the issue. 150 people showed up. Maybe they wanted to talk too, but I don't know why. but then that's now transferred to, this is a state problem where we have to go home and tell all of our school districts that because of this problem in this community, that the entire state's gonna be under some pretty severe punishment if they don't follow a rule that doesn't pertain to them, or at least and all I can tell you is that in my community, I have not heard one complaint, one word, anything about this entire issue. Not once, not one, and boy, I'll tell you what, when their school board goes awry, I hear about it usually pretty quick. So that's the part I'm confused about, that there's just this massive problem in one area, and now it needs a massive statewide solution. I hear about this all the time, but usually for folks, frankly, on the other side of the aisle well, forget it. But the point is, I'm on and against this just because I think we took a local problem and we're trying to do a statewide solution. A, that I don't think exists, B, doesn't pertain to my community, and C, is a local problem that should be dealt with at the local level, which is what we always say about local solutions until we don't. On and against. Thank you.
Senator Larson, do you want to wait and let your chair take care of the committee of the whole? And then we'll come back to either you or Senator French. Senator Schuler, Chairman Schuler, you want to take care of committee of the whole amendment?
Yes, I would. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think I've already moved this.
He's got to read it in.
Okay, please read it in.
Senate File 62, Committee of the Whole Amendment Number 1, page 4, line 12, delete.
Senator Schuler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would move Committee of the Whole Amendment Number 1 to Senate File 62. This kind of goes along with the first part of the other amendment. Again, my issues had a lot to do with not just the schools, but the coaching part of it. Again, looking at some of the smaller schools, they may only have one coach. She may be a female, she may be able to go in the locker room, but they're saying on page 4 that coach has to be accompanied by not less than one additional adult at all times. A lot of times these little schools don't have a JV coach or a sophomore coach or even a female bus driver. So I just made that language permissive, and it just says the coach may be accompanied by not less than one additional adult at all times. And I think that kind of helped me a little bit with understanding that in some of our schools, we just don't have the personnel that travel with our coaches to be able to follow this to the letter of the law. Down there on a little bit further, it talks about the coach of the opposite sex, and that we also amended that. But anyway, that would be my wish, is that we would vote yes on this one. Again, it's on page 4, and it just takes the language from shall to may. Thank you.
Committee of the Whole Amendment, any further discussion? Any further discussion? Ready for the question on the amendment? Question be called. Amendment number 1, Committee of the Whole Amendment number 1 to Senate File 62. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. It's passed. We're back on the bill. Now, gentlemen, either one of you. Senator French.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, to try to respond to the good senator with the tall mountains. What happened up in our area is there were these complaints. There was a trans individual, and the school district did try to, they said he can use the girls' bathroom, or we'll try to provide a place for him to go to the bathroom. And you know how people are, especially in high school, sometimes in your face. That's where we ended up with the individual, in your face. Well, these girls were scared. They wouldn't go to the bathroom. They were holding it till noon. Very painful for these young girls up there. They would hold it till noon, and then they'd run or drive to a friend's house to go to the bathroom, or some business close by, and come back. And that's where this all come from. And bend over backward for the rights of one, but stomp on the rights of several hundred girls up there in that school district. That's kind of where this all come about. And the girls are afraid. They're not going to, the people up there had said, well, we're not getting any complaints. Well, the kids in high school have a kind of a code of their own. When I was in high school, a long time ago, had our own code. You didn't rat, you weren't a snitch, you didn't rat out whatever, So they were afraid. That's how this all come about. And the individual took advantage of that alternate space for him, and good, but also was told, you can use the girls' bathroom. They wanted to have a, for lack of a better word, bathroom cop, bathroom monitor, a teacher's aide, a parent, anything to try, so we didn't have to get to this point. That, hey, during the break, so-and-so's in there, girls, wait, when he comes out, you can go in. Or he comes up to use the girls' bathroom, wait, there's some girls in there. You know, that was an easy fix for this thing. Didn't have to get to this level. And so hopefully that, you know, it was a messed up situation up there, and it's a shame. And I'm glad that that situation isn't elsewhere. I really am. So that's how this come about. That's why we wanted some teeth in it, because, I mean, it was almost a year of parents saying, please do something. Please, these girls are in misery. They're afraid to go in the bathroom. They, you know, it was bad. That's why we're here. So hopefully that answered some of it.
Senator Larson, you want to wrap it up, or do we have some more response over here? First, wait, Senator Larson, let's go Rothfuss, Pearson in that order. Senator Rothfuss.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was a no in committee, and a lot of the conversation related to the fact that the school boards are empowered to solve this problem locally, and they're duly elected. You know, when we contemplate local control issues, the first thing we need to ask is, can they solve the problem? Yes or no? If they can solve the problem, then the baseline should be its local control, and we need some interest where the legislature needs to step in and create a one-size-fits-all solution. Now, there was a request by the district because there was actually some concern about whether it was legal for them to, right? Their internal legal analysis left some question, and more about whether they'd be sued under US Constitution or state constitution for violating rights, as opposed to whether they had the legal authority. So the request basically was, all right, well, if we have the legislature do it, then they'll get sued instead of us. And that's probably true. So it's more of a shift of lawsuit rather than will there or will there not be a lawsuit. In fact, this bill is apparently being sued right now in another state, or maybe a couple of other states. So there are lawsuits pending against effectively this bill in other states. So as we contemplate this issue, I think it's important to realize that it's an opportunity for us to respect local control. And if we want to provide some sort of clarification or cover for that local control, that might be in order, and I think it's within the title. But, Mr. Chairman, the idea that the solution that is favored by the district that brought this shall be favored by all districts is unnecessary. My district, I don't think, wants this particular solution. I would suspect that if each of us went back home and talked to each of our districts, a lot of them would say, no, we can handle this locally. No, we've got this. I think that's how most of us would come down. I know my district's going to come down with a we got this solution. And Mr. Chairman, the reason for that, which was one of the concerns I expressed in committee, is the idea that this is very much an individual case-by-case circumstance that honestly needs to even look around the building and figure out what resources a building has before you decide what the appropriate policy has. This is not simple, good top-down government. You know, we all love our big government here in Cheyenne, but it doesn't always work as well as we want it to. Mr. Chairman, I'm absolutely confident that my local school district has handled and can handle this challenge and doesn't want it to look like this particular bill, particularly because of the private right of action, which is the last concern I want to talk about, Mr. Chairman. We talked about this in committee also, the possibility of taking out the H paragraph, which now has become the G paragraph, which allows a private right of action. So when you think about a lawsuit against the district and the idea of teeth in it, what does that mean? We think about, all right, well, we're going to punish the district. How does the district get punished when we take dollars away? Well, the district has less budget. Therefore, there's less capacity to hire teachers. And therefore, the student classes end up growing. So when you file a lawsuit that leads to $1 million outcome, because there's no cap on this, and I'd like to look to the majority leader who walked away, but she can tell us about whether this would or would not be capped under any government claims. Maybe one of our other attorneys can talk about that. If it isn't capped, you can just imagine that we won, victory, total vindication, $500,000 we have taken away from the local school district. Hooray. And so as a result of that, whoever's students are in that district that were entirely unrelated end up having larger class sizes, less resources. Maybe their band doesn't get a new uniform. It's not appropriate teeth, because all it does is punish the other students in the district rather than anyone that was responsible for the decision. That, regrettably, Mr. Chairman, is how government works. So we have this bill that has big teeth that will lead to other kids potentially losing resources as a one-size-fits-all solution that my district doesn't want. And again, I encourage everyone in here to ask your superintendent if they want this bill in its current form to pass, and then vote accordingly. Because it's not going to pass if you do that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Pearson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would almost bet in these districts that are not doing what they need to do to protect women's spaces, it has to do with funding that they got. I am in support of this bill because we need to say, we are going to protect women's spaces. We are going to protect our girls in these schools. I know there's there's the argument of local control. I understand that, but some of these school districts, if we don't provide them guidance, they are not going to comply, and they are not going to protect the girls in these schools. And what you have to understand is regardless of a lawsuit, these school districts, some of them, even if there are lawsuits brought to them, they're of the mindset that their school district attorneys will handle it and they'll just keep filing whatever the letter is, I don't even know what it's called, to delay. And parents cannot afford that. Parents that are trying to sue the school district for whatever they think has happened to their child, they don't have the money for that, but the school district sure do. So we've got to protect our girls. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Bill sponsor, Senator Larson, you want to close this out? Oh, let's go to Senator Ide, and then Senator Larson will come back to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On for this bill, I think it's a small step toward some moral sanity in our taxpayer-funded schools. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Larson, you want to close out? Senator Scott?
Mr. Chairman, on and for this bill. Basically, for years, we've just been functioning in this area by the use of common sense. And what's happened is that there's been some ideologically driven forces in the society that has departed from what most of us think is common sense. This bill just restores the common sense. I don't think it exposes us particular outrageous damages. I think the result of a private lawsuit to enforce this is going to be a simple injunction telling the school district to follow the law. It's going to be much more difficult to prove any kind of monetary damages. So, Mr. Chairman, on and for the bill. The bill really just is putting into statute common sense, which we wish we didn't have to do, but in this day and age, we seem to.
Senator Larson, you want to close it out?
Mr. Chairman, I can't say that any better than the good senator over here. This is a good bill. Our school districts need it. Not all of them, but good majority of them. Their boards are just not going to do much unless we pass something and give them guidance.
Thank you. Ready for the question? Question being called. All those in favor of Senator Schuler's motion that when the Committee of the Whole rises to report, that it do so with a favorable recommendation of Senate File 62. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. No. Senate File 62 is passed the Committee of the Whole. Next bill up for our consideration, Senate File 84. Read it in.
Senate File 84, Country of Origin Label USA Beef, an act relating to food labeling, sponsored by Senator Steinmetz. Was referred to Committee Number 5, which returned to committee recommendation that it do pass amended. Ayes Senators Crago, French, Ide, McEwen, and Pearson. Senator French, Chairman.
Chairman French, and acknowledge, go ahead and acknowledge that you've got an amendment there too. Go ahead, Senator.
Mr. Chairman, I move that when the committee of the whole rises to report, it do so with the recommendation that Senate File 84 do pass, and for an explanation, I call on Senator Steinmetz.
Senator Steinmetz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And there is a committee of the whole amendment. I'd like to have that written at this time.
Senator, was a standing committee.
A standing committee amendment, sorry.
Right, yeah, go ahead, read it in.
Senate File 84, Standing Committee Amendment Number 1, page 3, line 7, after.
Senator Steinmetz, give us some direction.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would move Standing Committee Amendment Number 1 to Senate File 84 and ask for your favorable consideration. I will explain it as I explain the bill, because it pretty much goes right into the same section.
Please proceed. At some point, let's call for a vote on that. Go ahead.
All right. After I explain it, I'll call for a vote. So, good senators, I bring you Country of Origin Labeling USA Beef. This is nothing new to our body, because in 2019, when I was a brand new senator here in the body, we started with our cell-cultured or plant-based products labeling, which required vegetarian, veggie, vegan, or plant-based to indicate on the product as plant-based. That was when we had the fake meat outbreak. This time, we want to label beef on page 3, beef that is derived from cattle born, raised, slaughtered, and processed in the United States shall clearly be labeled as a product of the United States of America. Fellow senators, our imports of beef have doubled since 2013. Thus, the need for this bill for clear labeling for the public so that they can understand what they are consuming, value added for the producer, and it would even help our smaller local grocers who benefit from carrying a USA product. The amendment would go in on page 3, line 7, and it just adds in, for the purposes of this paragraph, beef labeled as United States of America beef shall include meat processed and slaughtered and clearly labeled as Wyoming beef, local beef, or with some other specific indicator that the beef qualifies as beef of the United States of America under this paragraph. So that's all it does, is it clarifies if some of our producers already have labeling and packaging that identify that their product is here. We don't want them to have to go in and do a bunch of work to retool their labeling. So with that, I would call for the question on the amendment unless there are questions about the amendment.
Further discussion on the amendment? There being none, question on the amendment. All those in favor of Standing Committee Amendment Number 1 to Senate File 84, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. The amendment's passed. We're back on the bill. Go ahead. Anything else?
I have nothing else on the bill. I'd stand for questions or call for the
Any
question.
further discussion on the bill? Senator Rothfuss.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm curious who the onus is on and what happens if they don't comply. I see the intent, but I was just walking through how this would work, and it seems like this actually puts an onus on a U.S. beef producer to comply with statute as opposed to, foreign entities that are shipping to the United States. And so it almost seems like it's more onerous on the people that the bill is trying to protect than it is on those that aren't. And I was wondering if that was discussed.
Senator Steinmetz, let's see if there's anything else, and then we can have you close it out. Anybody else? No. Senator Steinmetz, close us out.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So it is, the onus is on if you look on page 2, it is on every retailer or wholesaler who sells or offers for sale in the state through an establishment in any way. So farmers markets, things like that, they would be the retailer at that time. But if they're just providing to a grocery store, it would be the grocery store's issue to resolve. Most people in the marketplace want this labeling. The problem with labeling the imported beef is the fact that we can't really regulate that as the state of Wyoming, but we can regulate this area. And so this is how we've chosen to approach it, to give everyone the benefit of knowing where their beef comes from. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Close out. Senator McEwen, did I miss you standing? Okay, we're good. Okay. Ready for the question? Question be called. All those in favor of Senator French's motion that when the committee of the whole rises to report, that it do so with a favorable recommendation of Senate File 84. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, nay. Senate File 84 is passed the committee of the whole. Next bill up for consideration, Senate File 78. Please read it in.
Senate File 78, Prohibition on Distribution of Unsolicited Ballot Forms, an act relating to elections, sponsored by Senator Hutchings. Was referred to Committee Number 7, which returned a committee recommendation that it do pass amended by Senators Boner, Case, Dockstader, Landon, and Steinmetz. Senator Case, Chairman.
Senator Case. And we do have an amendment, sir. Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, I move that when the committee of the whole rises to report, that it do so with a do pass recommendation on Senate File 78. There is a standing committee amendment. I ask that you read it in at this time.
Please read it in.
Senate File 78, Standing Committee Amendment Number 1, page 1 above line 1, in.
Senator Case.
Mr. Chairman, I would move the standing committee amendment to Senate File 78 and ask that you vote aye. What this really does is just change the catch title, the little tiny title at the top of the bill. And the reason is that the bill is not about ballots themselves. The bill is about the forms where you request a ballot. So the title says Prohibition on the Distribution of Unsolicited Ballot Forms. It's actually about ballot request forms. But we run into a problem that you're limited by the number of characters in a line across there. So we had to change it a little bit. So it's now distribution of unsolicited absentee ballot request forms. And Mr. Chairman, if you look in the real title, the title that matters constitutionally are the lines 1 through 4. It's perfectly accurate. An act relating to elections prohibiting a person from distributing unsolicited absentee ballot application forms to any qualified elector as specified and providing for an effective date. So that's the form that we're talking about with this bill. So that's the standing committee amendment, and I ask for your favorable consideration. I think we should let the sponsor of the bill speak to everything before we pass the amendment, though.
Okay, let's come back to the sponsor, Senator Hutchings. And you're speaking, if you want to, the amendment as well, both the bill and the amendment. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I thank Chairman Case for bringing the amendment to the body. This was a recommendation by our county clerks, which I fully support. So on and for the amendment, and if you'd like, I'd go ahead and discuss the bill so we can vote on both at the same time. I'm fine with it.
Do you want to, we've had a motion on the amendment. Do you want to just?
I'm in agreement
Yeah,
with
we
it,
got
sir,
a
so
question
we
on
can
it.
vote on it. We can
Okay,
vote on
we're on the amendment now.
it. Yes, sir. Vote
Question on the amendment. All those in
Correct.
favor of Senate File, or excuse me, of Standing Committee Amendment Number 1 to Senate File 78, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. Back on the bill. Go ahead, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We've seen this 3 times. This is your 3rd time. If you look in your box, you'll see a document. For those of you who have not heard about this incident before, during one election cycle, a candidate sent out a very nice mailer, but unfortunately, the mailer looked exactly like an absentee ballot request form. And many people filled it out and sent it in. And according to the county clerks, they don't like that. And I think a lot of them didn't get processed. So with that, Mr. Chairman, we have Senate File 78, which pretty much says on line 1 to the top line of page 2, that no person except a county clerk, the Secretary of State, or their designee shall distribute an absentee ballot request form to any qualified elector unless the qualified elector specifically asks for it. Now, that does not mean that a candidate cannot go through a neighborhood and canvass and provide a link to the absentee ballot request form to a qualified voter or tell them about it, or excuse me, neither does that mean that a group of people that want to inform voters cannot provide the link as a point of information. With that, Mr. Chairman, I ask for your favorable yes on Senate File 78 for the third time, and hopefully we can get it through the other chamber.
Questions or discussion? Questions or discussion? Question on Senate File
Question.
78, question being called. All those in favor of Senator Case's motion that when the committee of the whole rises to report that to do so with a favorable motion of Senate File 78, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. Senate File 78 is passed the committee of the whole. Next bill up for consideration, Senate Joint Resolution 3. Please read it in.
Senate Joint Resolution 3, commemorating Nellie Taylor Ross. A joint resolution commemorating the 100th anniversary of Nellie Taylor Ross becoming the first woman to hold the office of governor in the United States. Sponsored by Senator Nethercott. Was referred to committee number 4, which returned to committee recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Senators Brennan, Olson, Rothfuss, Schuler, and Scott. Senator Schuler, chairman.
Senator Schuler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move that when the committee of the whole rises to report it, do so with the recommendation that Senate Joint Resolution 3 do pass. And with that, I would turn the time over to our good majority floor leader.
Senator Nethercott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good senators, I bring you Senate Joint Resolution number 3 on this very special day in Wyoming history, which is the day that you heard this morning in our introduction that Wyoming ratified the 19th Amendment on January 27th, 1920. Woohoo! That is just the good fortune for today. It was heard this morning in Senate Education and heard today on the floor, and I think, although not intended, that timing is so serendipitous and so fortuitous and pretty special. Not any different than our women's suffrage pathway that goes for 19 miles in honor of the 19th Amendment, starting at mile marker 44. Another one of our Wyoming traditions honoring Wyoming's first, including this 100-year anniversary of Wyoming being the first state in these great United States to elect, let me underscore the word elect, a female governor. There's a lot of misinformation about Miss Ross, former Governor Ross, and that her husband passed away and she was then took his spot and was appointed. That is not true. He died before the election and she was placed on the ballot, and she was elected by the constituents of Wyoming who chose a female governor. She won the vote by 10%, and she was sworn in January 2025. So we are currently celebrating that 100-year anniversary. Her friends told her she shouldn't run shortly after her husband died, but she did it anyway. I think that shows just what kind of a Wyoming woman she really was. She was defeated in her following election, but then she was appointed to the United States Mint, and she held that position for 20 years. So through the 20s and through the 50s, she held the position of the director of the United States Mint through all of the social change that we experienced through the 40s and 50s and early 60s. She was part of that leadership there. And I just think it's important for us to take this time and end this difficult day, but very critical day, an important day in Wyoming's history, commemorating a true Wyoming pioneer, Nellie Taylor Ross, the United States' first female governor, elected by the people of Wyoming. Good senators, I ask for your favorable vote before we end for the day.
Discussion or questions? Senator Landon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't want to belabor. I know it's getting late into the evening. This is a wonderful resolution. Your historical exhibit committee over the past 2.5 years has dealt with many of the issues described by the senator. Every day that you go down into the extension, the Capitol extension, you greet the former governor. And I think it's pretty amazingly cool that the committee came up with the idea that she is headed to the governor's office. And if you notice that the chief is looking off toward the Wind River Mountains, where he belongs. And so it just makes it kind of special. There's a reason why this place is a National Historic Landmark. And in part, it's due to all of that suffrage that was alluded to by our good majority floor leader. It's a great resolution. I'm going to support it wholeheartedly. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Question? Question being called. All those in favor of Senator Schuler's motion that when the Committee of the Whole rises to report, that to do so with a favorable recommendation of Senate Joint Resolution Number 3. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. Senate Joint Resolution 3 is passed the Committee of the Whole. Madam Floor Leader.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the Committee of the Whole rise and report.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, nay. President.
Senator Dockstader, or actually, Committee of the Whole report. I'm getting ahead of myself here.
Mr. President, your Committee of the Whole, having had under consideration bills on general file, begs leave to report as follows. Senate File 17, do pass amended. Senate File 18 failed to pass Committee of the Whole and was indefinitely postponed. Senate File 39, do pass amended. Senate File 62, do pass amended. Senate File 84, do pass amended. Senate File 78, do pass amended. Senate Joint Resolution 3, do pass. Senator Dockstader, Chairman.
Okay, now Senator Dockstader.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move for adoption of the Committee of the Whole report.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Committee of the Whole report has been adopted. Thank you, Senator Dockstader. Do we have any messages? Okay. All right. I'm told we'll do those tomorrow because there's a lot, and we have a management council meeting we got to get to. So with that, Madam Majority Floor Leader.
Mr. President, I move that we stand adjourned until 10 a.m. Tuesday, January 28th, 2025.
All right. Any announcements? Senator Landon.
Thank you, Mr. President. Your Travel, Recreation, and Wildlife Cultural Resources Committee, number 6, will meet tomorrow morning, 8 a.m. in Capitol Extension Room W4. That's the Wind River Room. We'll take up Senate File 108, Recreation, Safety, Agritourism. Senate File 152, Wildlife Management Task Force and State Forester. Senate File 148, Fire Suppression and Restoration Funding. And Senate File 149, Wildlife Conservation License Plates Amendments.
Thank you. Senator French.
Thank you, Mr. President. Your Committee number 5, Agricultural, State and Public Lands and Water Resources, will meet tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. in Capitol Extension Room 6 and online to consider the following 2 bills. Senate File 120, Wyoming Prime Act, and Senate File 127, Administrative Rules, Legislative Review and Objection.
Thank you. Senator Olson.
Thank you. Your Committee number 1, Judiciary, will meet tomorrow upon noon recess in room W002 to consider 3 bills: Senate Joint Resolution 5, Congressional Term Limits; Senate File 77, Compelled Speech is not free speech; and Senate File 117, Shared Parenting.
Okay. Vice President Salazar.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Joint Appropriations Committee will meet tomorrow upon noon recess, and we'll be getting a walkthrough with staff and vote for sponsorship of the draft bill tomorrow in room 301. Thanks.
Thank you. Senator McEwen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senate File 68, Government-Owned Lands, needs to be re-referred to Committee number 2, Appropriations.
Oh, can't do re-refers yet. We'll do them tomorrow. Thank you. Okay, we have 2 of them, I'm told tomorrow. Senator Pappas.
Thank you, Mr. President. One more reminder, your Transportation Committee will meet in the morning at 8 a.m. in the Capitol Extension and online to consider the following bills: Senate File 45, Wyoming State Guard Amendments; Senate File 119, expedited professional licensure for military members. Senate File 5, school district vehicles, flashing lights authorized. Senate File 106, motor vehicle dealer and manufacturer warranty rates. Senate File 110, inclusion of crossing guards for Governmental Claims Act. And if time permits, Senate File 121, rodeo license plate.
Thank you. Any further announcements? All right, you've all heard the motion. All those in favor, say aye. All those opposed, no. Senate will stand adjourned until 10 a.m. Tuesday, January 28th.